All right, you guys, I'm super excited. I've got the three authors of a badass book called Biotra. It's right here in my beautiful hands, and it's a big book, but it's quite easy to read. It's got nice, good-sized text, which is great when you get to be my age. I don't like small text anymore, but it's well illustrated, lots of graphs, lots of great information. The concept was interesting enough for me to accept the offer to write the foreword. So I wrote one of the forewords and another foreword by Gerald Pollack, who most of you will be familiar with. He's the guy that identified the fourth phase of water. And this book is extremely well-rounded. And the reason I put my time and energy to writing the foreword to it is because I think it's a very, very important book right now in the world. Probably one of the most important books out there, because it is kind of like my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. It's weaving many of the key things together that are essential to a healthy, well-rounded life as a human being. And it covers areas that, unfortunately, a huge percentage of the population are detached from or unconscious of, and it's costing them dearly. And so the other thing I like about the book is that it doesn't require a lot of technical equipment. Most of it's very nature-based. There's a place in there where I see Nick using club bells, and I think you got the same club bells I do in my gym in there, Nick. But it's a beautiful book. So if you're an exercise professional, a healthcare professional, an athlete, or someone that just is genuinely interested in health and well-being, I think it's a fantastic book. So today, because I have three guests on the show, the three authors, Nick, Ryan, and Nathan, I'm going to let each of them tell you a little bit about themselves and what shaped their living philosophy and what led them to wanting to write this book. And then we'll dive in from there, because I'd like you guys all to have a sense of who the authors are. So who wants to go first? You guys want to arm wrestle over it or what?
Ryan would win that arm wrestle, so he may as well.
Okay.
Oh, me, all right. Thrown under the bus. Paul, we're gonna have 3 hours of Nick throwing me under the bus. Just get ready for it, mate.
That's all right. I'll throw him under the bus now and then too.
Yeah.
yes, please. Man, I'm happy to kick it off. So thank you for having us on, Paul, and thank you for the forward. It's a real honor. You personally have been in my spheres for 15 years, man. So really cool. Thank you.
I'm getting old.
Me too. So what brought me to this, Paul, was I'd say, like, generally I'm a seeker, and I have quite a classic story of quite a conventional upbringing, and probably not a lot of guidance and help in really finding out who I am and what I wanted to do. And so I was an athlete. That's how Nick and I go back to training together. And man, that all fell apart for me. And when that house of cards came tumbling down, I just dived deep into seeking. So plant medicines, yoga, initiations, rites of passage, all of the pieces that I feel are missing from culture. And where that landed me was asking the really big questions, and then finding myself falling short when I looked to the traditional institutions that are meant to answer those questions, or are meant to connect me with something that felt truly significant. And through plant medicines, mentors, particularly a man named Don Rosenthal, it really landed me in this place of nature being the truest statement of who I am at my core. And when these bros came together to bring the book alive, to bring Biotra alive, my stance is you can be as healthy as you want and you can have the perfect environment, but if you hate yourself, you're fucked.
That means you're not healthy. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah. That's really my angle here, is that I think health is actually irrelevant of circumstance, and true health comes with remembering that I am nature, and not just on an intellectual level, but a lived, embodied, day-to-day, moment-to-moment movement. And where I think I have a knack is providing frameworks particularly for the Western mind to understand and remember that. So it's non-dogmatic, non-denominational. It's not owned by anyone, and it's a direct experience and a lived experience of reconnecting with my true nature. And in doing that, I connect to something much greater. And then how do I bring that into how I live? And I really focus on relationship, man. I think relationship is the litmus test for how spiritual I am. I can be enlightened, but if I'm an asshole, what does it matter?
It means you're not enlightened.
There you go. Yeah, I agree. So that's my angle. That's what I love doing, man. I love that exploration.
Well, I love everything you've shared. It just makes me want to ask you a question. You must be somewhat concerned with that philosophical underpinning about where AI is taking everybody.
Well, there's a paradox there. If I truly trust nature and I know that everything is born from the same origins, then I'm invited to trust life and its evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this feels a little off.
Mm-hmm.
So straddling that, how do I meet that not from a place of contraction, fear, and judgment, from curiosity, openness, and then engaging in the world to maybe redirect in a way that is potentially healthier for all of humanity?
Yeah. It just makes me want to say something, which I will, because that's we're here to discuss all these issues. We all have to be conscious of where the tipping point of nature versus something other emerges.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I took the philosophy you just said, then I could say, well, SSRI drugs are nature, and so is all the other crazy shit that's destroying nature, from pesticides to glyphosate. That would fall into the same category as you've just put AI. And I think the human beings are the tip of the sword of evolution within nature, at least on this planet. I'm somebody who's gifted with many abilities, including remote viewing, and I can tell you that the idea that we're alone in the universe is ridiculous. And we're actually quite stupid compared to the beings I've interacted with over many years of my life. But, nature produces natural things. And there's a lot of things that we synthesize, like hormones and drugs, that do more damage to us than they do good. So I think, not that your book by any means, you guys, takes us into the realm of what we're talking about here. I just think we're at a point in the evolution of human beings where a lot of what's stopping us from being the healthy people that your book's trying to give us guidance to get to is that our intellects keep coming up with things that actually are antagonistic to our own well-being. And I'll give you a simple example of that. We've been making tools for a very long time, but having studied this myself, there's very clear evidence that the further we've gone with tool making and the more we've replaced our actual connection to nature, the dumber we've got, the more sedentary we've got, the sicker we've got, and the more dangerous we've gotten to each other. So, it's philosophically, it's a very interesting paradox as to where nature ends and what do you call it beyond that tipping point. And the last thing I'll say is evolution, as all of you know, is a parallel process in which there's a lot of attempts at a lot of things. There are many variations of every kind of creature out there that did not make it. We're here because our ancestors made it. But how many died, on the way because of some lack of ability to adapt to the environment or the environment that we created for each other, such as, genocide and wars and all that. So these are very deep issues. And I think it's relevant because what you guys are sharing in your book is really nature-based, or what I would call natural intelligence versus artificial intelligence. I
agree, Paul. You're articulating that. You're articulating it spot on, man. And I guess the suggestion that I'm offering, and the flip of going, hey, this is all bad and this is wrong, then enters us into the territory of knowing, and we know. And that then enters us into the dogma of old school religion. And then we condemn those who don't know and punish. And so it goes both ways there. And
it does. It's
what
very
I'm suggesting
tricky.
is when someone has a direct experience of their true nature, they tend to be wary of pesticides. They tend to realize that SSRIs aren't good, but that requires them to have a real deep knowing of who they are. And that's at the essence of Biotra. That's where I feel is the anchor to an evolution where we support our pro-social behavior instead of killing each other.
Well, you're everything you're saying is great, and I agree with it. And the issue that it brings up in me is that the percentage of people that know themselves and know their nature now is so minuscule. I think I mentioned this statistic in our conversation, Nicholas, with you previously. Research shows that only 8% of men and 3% of women worldwide do any regularly scheduled exercise whatsoever, including walking a dog. As I tell my students in class, you could be in a city like San Diego, driving through a town like Encinitas and see pelotons of 200 bicycle riders and golf courses and tennis courses and think, oh my God, everybody in San Diego exercises. But what you don't realize, you're seeing everyone that's exercising in a city of over 3 million people. So it looks like there's a lot of people around you that are exercising, but you just happen to be near the beach where people like to go to exercise and get naked and get some sun. But far, far vastly greater is the number of people that are sitting in their house playing with their phones and watching television, eating processed garbage. So the point I'm making is, I think one of the reasons for this podcast and a lot of my podcasts and your book is that we have to support people in simply getting back to their nature and how to get there. Because until, this is the punchline of my paradox, until you are in touch with your nature, you don't have awareness of what is antagonistic to your own nature. Therefore, you're susceptible to ads, gimmicks, whatever your doctor tells you need, God forbid. And you only find out when you're in really deep trouble or when you're dying that you probably should have been a little more careful.
Yeah, bang on.
Anyhow, I don't mean to interject in the introductions, but if you guys say stuff that I think's interesting and worth elaborating on, I have to do it because that's who I am.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. This is I love having this conversation because for me, we're talking about the nuance, and I completely agree. And just to, round out my introduction is that when the whole idea is to provide a pathway for people to have a sovereign experience of their true nature and encourage them heavily to do that, because I think that's the antidote to the antagonistic attributes that are coming at us thick and heavy.
Yes. And, that, of course, is the main theme of yoga. Just answer the question, who am I? Mm-hmm. And, we've got thousands of years of yoga and yoga philosophy, which I think if you spread that from India to around the world, it's really exactly what you're referring to, but it's something that should be taught to us as children. And I think maybe your next book should be a book for parents to apply these principles to kids.
We've discussed it.
Yeah. I think if you took all that and synthesized it down into a Dr. Dolittle approach, so parents, because I found a lot of parents will do things for their kids, but they won't do them for themselves. And I think because the kids are the future, and they're in worse shape than adults are now, you guys putting your heads together and doing something for the children, but via the parents, so they know, they have a structure. It's simple and easy to follow, and the parents couldn't help but actually get healthier by doing what you suggest to do for their kids. So thank you, Ryan. It was great. Thanks for that. You just happened to touch issues inside of me. They're important, and I'm a contemplative meditator, so I take these complicated issues and meditate on them sometimes for years at a time, trying to bring it to something that I can express to people within a minute or two.
I was just saying to the others offline, Paul, that one of my favorite pastimes is listening to each of you speak. And so it's very difficult for me not to want to be a fly on the wall here. I realize I can't be purely passive, but
you used to say this is Nicholas first, so we know who's talking.
This is Nicholas. Yeah. yeah, exactly. Look, my passion that's really alive in me right now is attempting to understand and explore the deepest codes of how human movement originates, what's contained within us thereafter, and what often lies dormant in people's movement and neurological regulation. And so I'm committed to finding strategies to move with the changes in the populations that I see in the clinic, which no doubt are the tip of the spear of what's going on in the broader population, and will most likely continue to build unless strategies like what you've been implementing in the last 4 decades and what we're jumping on top of shoulders like yours and trying to implement now for people, which is this radical return to a practitionerless predominantly system that they can trust, that is complex and sophisticated enough to hit all of the facets of basic health without it being inaccessible in terms of the entry point and the understanding of the material. In other words, an embodied and an experienced process that somebody can embark upon, start to feel changes in their body and start to become curious as to what led to those changes, what led to that positivity, and what they can then further or deepen their understanding in the respective portions that contributed to that or that they believe contributed to that, and become much better versed in what they can do for themselves, their communities, and their families. So I really cut my teeth in the clinical sector, but as Ryan alluded to in his introduction, formerly in the athletic sphere, which I still participate in passively. And so I see a lot of similarities between how elite athletes move their bodies and require various support structures to continue to do so, and what I see in the functional neural element in the clinic. And so if something holds true for both of those parties, then most likely is a deep thread within humans themselves, and most likely will be of use for everyone in the middle of the bell curve, which constitutes the majority of people.
You know, enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are Masszymes by Bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about Masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions, or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things, and they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take Masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is Masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK listeners can get 15% off their purchase of Masszymes by going to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL15 at checkout. You can choose from 3 different sizes, and in addition, Bioptimizers always have special bonus gifts and additional savings when you get multiple bottles. So go to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and check out Masszymes.
Well, that question that you're using to guide your investigations is exactly the question that led to the development of the CHEK Totem Pole and the Primal Pattern movement system.
Yeah.
The CHEK Totem Pole is a survival reflex totem pole. It's like what systems of the body make what adjustments and what systems do they control based on how we had to survive in nature, from bacteria and single-celled organisms all the way up. And it just, it was a question of me spending time in nature and observing. But fortunately, when I met Penny, I had somebody to talk to because she has a degree in biological anthropology from Cambridge University. So she had a lot of different perspectives that allowed me to ask her these kinds of questions. In this case, you, Nicholas, and I'm talking to, but it took me about 15 years of research and a lot of extensive study of the literature to correlate what I was seeing clinically with patients and what kind of situations led to their problems, to actually put those two systems together. The Primal Pattern system I developed and publicized in 1988. I think it took me till about 2003 or 4 to get the totem pole to where I had tested it enough over and over again to see that there was a consistent, reliable connection in these hierarchical systems. And, Nick, having talked to you enough, you're so deep into the clinical concepts. You're basically taking the same concepts that I did and correlating them with, modern research, which is, taking it to a more technical level, as far as when you have to teach like chiropractors and osteopaths and people like that have a framework for that level of understanding. But I think these are very, very important questions. And I'm just sharing that the same questions that are driving you drove me. I've done 5 cadaver dissections. And one of the questions that I had that goes right to your investigation is, why are the rhomboids at the angle they're at? Why is the vastus medialis oblique on a 72-degree angle? Why is the thoracic extensors predominantly fast twitch when they're right in the middle of a curve that should have predominantly slow twitch muscle fiber for postural functions, but it doesn't? Well, the answer is we have to rotate explosively to hunt, kill, and protect ourselves and to run. So the body had to make a compromise. So why that was important for me and why these investigations, I'm sure, are important to you guys, is because if we don't understand how the body is structured by nature, for nature, to not only survive but thrive in nature, we're at great risk of using rehabilitation approaches and exercise approaches that are actually antagonistic to the design of the body. And you get a bunch of people that are fit in the gym but can't perform on a sports field or in a court or whatever. And I've been dealing with that my whole career. And so answering these questions is very important. And having spent enough time in your guys' book, I can see that you've done a very, very good job of taking these very, very important principles of nature and weaving them into exercises, movement strategies and lifestyle strategies that actually do give us as much nature as we can bring into a modern life.
Can I just reiterate from the last time we spoke that I believe there's a new kid on the block, in that there's been such a massive deterioration in people's primordial fluid mechanics in their bodies, probably because of things to do with Nathan's section, that we have to very, very quickly pivot and provides solutions after an understanding and observations, provides solutions to people's deep fluid mechanical infrastructure in their bodies. And this takes them back to pre-birth movements and immediately post-birth writhing style gestalt movements. And one of the things that I think we've done that's a little bit unique is weave them in at the very earliest part of the movement system that we provide. So addressing these fluid mechanics that I've just attempted to write a little body of work. I'd love to share it with you off air, Paul, and their relationship with brainstem safety perception and how we can best foster that and bring people back into that as the starting point before layering on top these sequentially more complex movements to allow them to be in their true nature of biomechanics, feeling vibrant and engaging with their own body, their circumstances, and their surrounds. So if there's an opportunity later after the introductions, I'd love to explore a little bit about why I think that the fluid component of what we do is really the most novel and most unique aspect.
Yeah, it's certainly an area I've looked into a lot in my own career because there's a lot of problems with the hydrodynamics of the body, if you want to put it that way, that shows up as a lot of pathology that people have. But what you made me think of is two things. That's why I studied infant development so much, because whatever is incomplete in infant development shows up as compensatory patterns that go on through the rest of their life, no matter how high you reach on the athletic totem pole. Because those guys are great compensators. And, I have a saying, compensation kills the cat, because I've rehabbed a lot of the best athletes in the world that got to the point where they went into decompensation and now they have nowhere to go except to a clinic. The other thing that I think's, because you guys have already mentioned psychedelics here, plant medicines, which are psychedelics, having conducted as many healing ceremonies as I have and gone very deep on plant medicines myself, one of the things that's not uncommon is when you get someone into a deep plant medicine journey is they will actually relive the birthing process, and they will automatically start doing what would be classically in utero and early infant development movements without even knowing that they're doing it. And I even actually in Australia at an eco resort, one of my instructors wanted me to take her on a ceremony. So I took her into a deep ceremony, and she went into a birthing, reliving a birthing trauma she had. And she'd never told me this, but I could tell by what she was doing that she must have had the umbilical cord wrapped around her throat because she was struggling, like she was trying to get something off her throat. But the point I'm leading to is I had her on the shore of a lake, and without, she was too deep for me to even talk to. She was, one with the all, but her body immediately headed into the lake, and I had to jump in after her to make sure she didn't drown. But it was interesting for me to observe how her body wanted to be back in the water. Yeah. And so I let her stay in the water, but I just make sure I held her head so she didn't breathe water. But she actually was reliving a birthing process in the water. And so I'm just reiterating that I think that what you're talking about is important. I think it's very underappreciated. And I think, to close my commentary in that regard, there's a lot to say about the cerebral spinal fluid system and what Irvin M. Core called axioplasmic flow, because once the cerebral spinal fluid comes through the peripheral nerves, it's called axoplasmic flow. But there's a lot of problems in that system that link to all these other things that we're talking about that are very, very underappreciated.
Just to round out that topic, I think that what that all speaks to is the innate wisdom within the deepest echelons of the human's nervous system to innately know what retuning it needs to undergo in order to reset. wherever they're at in the present moment to reset and remember the depth of functionality and the depth of capacity that everyone has within them. And that's what this system and yours is attempting to allow people to do without needing to understand exactly why or how, but actually to tap back into that depth and allow that to emerge through those central metronomic rhythms of the fluid, through the perineural lubricants, immediately extend them into the layers that sit just on top of that. I've got this notion that's in the recent Biotra literature. It'll be in the revision of the book. It's a little wordy, but it's the conjugated chain of transfer. And the notion is that A doesn't very easily talk to D, but A talks very well to B, and in turn to C, and then finally to D. And unless all of those components are addressed in an order, in enough nourishment to excite the body for wherever it's at, we have a really hard time linking conventional rehabilitation strategies to organic, fluid human movement in a graceful manner in their lives.
I agree. My only departure from what you just said is I think the nervous system is not deep enough. Remember, the whole body forms out of the gut tube first, embryologically. Your skin is a membrane, and it's the sensory pole of your brain and nervous system, and it's actually feeding environmental information to the brain. I think the fluid system and the fascia system and even the membrane system is actually the deeper place that informs the brain in many ways. And if that system is out of balance, and then the whole brain is out of balance. So I think I agree with you, but I think that there's more to it than the brain and the nervous system.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. That's why we start with fluids and then move on to the electrical apparatus after. It's exactly how it's structured.
Yeah, cool. All right, Nate.
Paul, you literally hit perfectly onto my section because, that information processing from the peripheral skin, all that other non-brain, direct brain route is so foundational and such a big part of how the biophysics works in the body. So, hey, everyone, Nathan Siles here, the third piece of Biotra. And my mission at the moment with Biotra is to really illuminate the invisible and to educate how in a modern world, there's a lot of problems, a lot of chronic diseases, a lot of athletic performance and injuries that seem to be popping out of nowhere and surprising people. And they're not really a surprise when you understand the biophysical nature of the human living system. So I try to add a modern context to something that we never needed to study in the past. 50 years ago, biophysics was not even a thing. It was relegated to lab research with electron microscopes and particular diodes. And now it is such a foundational piece of living in the modern world. So my story to get to this point with the boys here and creating this incredible system that's very accessible to everyone is I started my journey at 8 months old with retinoblastoma, so cancer bilaterally on both eyes. And this sort of threatened my life quite early. And I went through, 30 general anesthetics and radiation treatment and was able to stop the spread of the cancer, but left me legally blind. And I grew up very different, as the major pathway through to the brain, the ocular pathway was clearly not transmitting as high fidelity signals. It left me with a little bit of growth and development challenges, but nothing that didn't stop me from being a state swimmer and soccer player, and achieving heights academically. And at 24, I was diagnosed with a second cancer, testicular cancer, which metastasized towards the liver. And this was another look in the mirror of, hey, you can be 170 pounds, you could be fit at the gym, you could be winning your age group, in swimming and soccer, but you can still get cancer. And, as a young man, it stops me in the prime of my life at 24. And I had to reevaluate everything I knew about health. And so that was where, diet and exercise paradigm just went out the window because I was eating like a champion and I was drinking good water and I was exercising outdoors. and regularly. And so I thought to myself, well, hey, what's going on? And it's the migration of my workday indoors in front of screens, sleeping in EMF loaded environments, eating at the wrong times, bad sleep schedule, all the different things. And so I went through a gigantic pilgrimage and education process around the world for the next 7 years, following experts like Dr. Jack Kruse and Dr. Gerald Pollack and Dr. Alexander Wunsch and Dr. Nick Lane, and more recently, Scott Zimmerman and Dr. Glenn Jeffrey, and, a lot more experts as well. And that's 2016, that's when I came across you, Paul, and being such an inspiration on expanding my mind even more. And once I got myself out of the woods of never worrying about getting a chronic disease again, I know how to prevent cancer. I know how to starve off every other chronic disease. I worked with 1,000 patients, was able to help them reverse various conditions using nature. And that could be from neurodegeneration, neurodevelopmental conditions, cancer, diabetes, all those things, fully reversible. And then I was able to prove out the model of biophysics as an isolated solution, not even incorporating exercise, biomechanics, psychospiritual nourishment. But then I saw the limitations and I saw that it was capped. And that's when I bumped into these boys and really took everything to the next level to know that we need all of this big triangle of everything together in order to allow the living system to thrive, not only to prevent chronic disease and live with a great health span, but also to optimize athletic performance and achieve peak potential.
If you have listened to even one episode of Paul's podcast before, then you will know that he is passionate, and some would say even fanatical, about the quality of the food he eats and where it is sourced from. That is why the CHEK household only eats pasture-raised meat, wild-caught fish, and organic produce. And that is why we subscribe to Wild Pastures Meat Delivery Service. Each month, Wild Pastures delivers a box of meat that has been raised by family farmers in the USA using regenerative farming practices. 100% grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, and pasture-raised pork, as well as wild-caught seafood. You can customize the selection in your box, add on extra when you know you will be feeding more people, or change your options each and every month. You might be thinking that this will be too expensive for you, but Wild Pastures' mission is to offer the highest quality meat at the lowest prices because they want to transform the meat industry. And that means that more people need to be able to choose meat that is raised right. Their pasture-raised animals are part of a natural ecosystem. Their farmers use rotational grazing, practices that mimic nature, and so do not need to use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. This beautiful process doesn't require the external resources, such as massive amounts of GMO grain, required with environmentally depleting conventional methods. And best of all, the meat and fish taste amazing. And for Paul's listeners, Wild Pastures are offering you 20% off your subscription for life, $15 off your first order, and free shipping. Seriously, you can't find a better deal for top quality pasture-raised meat. Go to wildpastures.com/PaulCheck. You don't need a promo code. Just visit wildpastures.com/PaulCheck and start choosing the goodies you will have delivered to you in your first box.
Yeah, Nathan, you've touched something that I don't speak about much, but I want to share it here because of your background. There is, and I was guilty of this for a long time until I came across the work of a very wise and deep woman named Margaret Newman, who was a holistic nurse. And she tried to reform the hospital system, but they rejected her attempts to do it. And she was very, very deep. If you look into her books, they're quite powerful. But what Margaret Newman found through a long nursing career, and she was a very deep woman. She was, really deep into consciousness studies. She cites Itzhak Bentov and some of the great minds that I've studied. And she really talks about disease and illnesses as a spiritual growth process. And having spent, 30 plus years studying Rudolf Steiner's work and many others, and I've actually met people that have no reason to have gotten cancer. But, if you were telling this story to a shaman, the shaman would say, Nathan, you've been initiated. You are now the wounded healer. So I think, as a side note for the podcast, I think it's important to remember that we can get diseases because the soul is initiating us into the wisdom tradition that we are here to do our work in, and that we need to be careful about thinking that just because someone's got an illness or a disease that they've done something wrong or they're not taking care of themselves, etc. Because in my career, I've probably had 20 really fit, super smart, highly health conscious people end up coming to me with a disease process and completely and utterly confused and even feeling resentful toward all the effort they've made to be healthy because now they assume it didn't work. And so I have to have a much more deeply spiritual conversation with them. And the other thing I wanted to share, this goes back to my discussion earlier with you, Nicholas, and that is the membrane concept. Steiner says that the more membranes there is in any living being, the higher the capacity for consciousness is in it. And so when I'm teaching people how to understand what spirit is and what soul is, I often use the analogy of a drum skin, which is a wooden frame with a membrane strung across it. And what that membrane's doing is catching spirit and transforming it into an experience, which is the domain of soul. If you're playing a drum to help someone heal and you're connected to the soul of that person, the soul of that person will transmit the rhythm that they need, which can change from moment to moment, but you're being a channel for that. That flow of energy and information that's guiding the movement of the drumstick, that's spirit. But once it hits the membrane and it begins to vibrate, now you actually have living information that's no longer in the implicate dimension or of spirit, the unknowable, immeasurable, and it's in the dimension of experience, feeling, and soul. And so I think that we're all very complex sets of membranes. And if you think of what you can get with a single membrane, call it a cell membrane or a shaman's drum, once you start coupling thousands of membranes together, you develop a resonant cavity. And that's what we are. We are a resonant cavity built out of membranes that captures spirit. And to the degree that we're conscious, then we begin to listen to the guidance of nature, because we have a deep inner voice inside of us that's saying, drink more water. Don't go that direction, go that direction. And I think why your book and what you guys are sharing is so important, because at a very fundamental level, if your body's all out of balance, your fluid dynamics are out, your biomechanics are out, your diet's out, you're gummed up inside, you could be in the middle of the best, most beautiful nature preserve in the world, but be very, very numb to the messages of Mother Nature or spirit or God or any other thing. And so I think that there's this sort of a scale between psychophysical health on one side and the wisdom of nature and the fact that we're all part of this much bigger living thing, call it Gaia if you want. But we have to sort of, and I think this is one of the things that makes your guys' book unique. And Ryan, I know you have a fair bit in there on the spiritual aspects. We have to bring these two together, but we also have to be careful about religious ideology and dogma, because that's not true spirituality. That's really no different than believing in veganism, and that's the only way to get healthy. And the next thing you know, you got cancer. And I've had plenty of those patients, because now you're not open And as soon as you start believing, you stop asking questions and you stop listening. So I think we're already in just what would be the introduction, we're already getting really right to the very, very core of the issues that are not only make us whole, but are stopping people from becoming whole, because the amount of marketing that is put in front of people and the amount of experts and the amount of trickery being used. And there's one word in your guys' book that I must say I really don't like, and that's biohacking. And the only reason I don't like it is because the concept itself is built on a false premise, which is taking shortcuts. I'm sure, you guys don't use it that way, but I think biohacking is part of a disease of our culture. And that what we're all talking about is what I call bioharmonizing. And I think that's where we've got to go collectively, or we're not going to be able to put our heads together to resolve the challenges that humanity has created for itself. Anyhow, thank you all for a very stimulating introduction. You're certainly getting to the core of my personal concerns.
Can I ask a question, Paul, off the back of that?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to say, I'm going to ask you a question, is AI a collective soul initiation?
Well, if you want to hear what Steiner has to say about that, have you ever listened to my episode 250, Lucifer Christ Ahriman?
No, but I will.
I highly recommend.
Purely because of that title. I'm in on the title.
Well, it's quite deep, and it gets into some very pertinent issues that we're talking about here. I could tell you my personal opinion, but I'd like to share Steiner's. First of all, and if you haven't heard this comment from Steiner, considering what you three are up to, it's worth meditating on very deeply. Rudolf Steiner said in about 1918, human beings will continue to invent technologies outside of themselves until they either destroy the world or realize that all the technologies they've invented are inferior copies of what is inside them. The question is, which will come first? That is exactly what Rudolf Steiner said. Now, if that's not a wise friggin' man, there's no such thing as a wise man. Now, what Steiner spoke about in regards to your question, he spoke about Ahriman, and Ahriman is the cosmic force that creates solidity, limits, and barrier. Lucifer is the light bringer, the bringer of consciousness, that which illuminates. But if it's out of balance, it also creates illusions. If Ahriman's out of balance, then it creates machines, automation, control, and tries to get everybody to do the same things. But it's actually a being that wants to control everything and often comes under the guise of making your life easier. Steiner said the Luciferic influence comes through the air and fire elements, and that the Ahrimanic influence comes through the earth and water elements with which the human being is composed. All of nature is composed of the elements fire, air, water, earth. So what Steiner said was that human beings will have a confrontation with Ahriman, and that Ahriman would begin to show up with things like medical vaccinations, advanced electronic technologies. But he said that electronic technologies are actually a doppelganger or a shadow of real spirit, that they're not actually spirit. They're like an impersonation of it. But he said that human beings have to go through this phase of development because ultimately they've got to come to the realization from direct experience that what they are is not matter, but they are spiritual beings, and that their physical bodies and the physical environment is like a cocoon. I'm using my own words to describe what he's really saying, that we're in a cocoon. And just like a caterpillar has to go through the process of breaking itself down in a cocoon and activating its imaginal cells to then transform into a butterfly, Steiner was basically saying we have to have a deep encounter with matter that takes us to the point where we have a visceral realization from which we will never turn back, that we cannot overly identify ourselves with matter because it takes us in the wrong direction. Instead of creating freedom, it actually binds us. The AI issue is the Ahrimanic deception. Automation, trying to make everything easier, Bill Gates trying to control the world. All of this is the Ahrimanic deception. But to close my commentary, it's important from Steiner's perspective to remember that these are not forces outside of you. These are the forces that make us human and give us the wild range of capacities that we have, all the way from being able to connect to the highest dimensions of spirit and source, all the way down to the, to diamonds and rocks and coal and the most material of material dimensions. But these are the two forces of consciousness. If you look at the tarot, when you see the sphinxes, for example, in Tarot 7, you got one white sphinx with black stripes. That represents yang, or the masculine. And you have a black sphinx with white stripes. That's the feminine. So just like the Tai Chi symbol shows, Lucifer would be the white fish. Ahriman would be the dark fish, or yin. And Steiner says the Christ principle is what holds them in balance. And as long as we don't wander too far into the yang or the Ahriman, or yang or the Lucifer, or yin or the Ahrimanic, then we will live a healthy, vital life, and we will grow spiritually without making a lot of effort, because spiritual growth is seated in us, just like an acorn has an oak tree seated in it. The entelechy of the acorn is the oak. It's guiding itself to the oak. I think why you're writing the books you're writing, why I've written all I've written, and why I started my institute was to ultimately try to help people find the middle path. And the Dawe means the middle way. Tarot means the royal road, which is ultimately the middle path. And I think really at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help people balance these two forces so that we're not. Otherwise, you think what happens if you're overly yang, it causes problems. If you're overly yin, it causes problems. So it's really, how do we live in the middle path? What I teach my students and my patients and my clients is there's a simple path through life. And it's so simple, it's shocking, but like the Tai Chi symbol, it's so simple that it takes you a lifetime to understand it if you really commit yourself to the study. And my simple teaching is not too much, not too little. Not too much exercise, not too little. Not too much food, not too little. Not too much sex, not too little. Not too much drugs, not too little. If you, in that, I'm a 64-year-old man that's been working the edges of this simple statement for my whole life, and I'm still learning how to find the middle every day. So, Ryan, sorry if that was a longer answer than you expected, but that's what Spirit wants to deliver.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ramana Maharishi put it very succinctly that the only problem is thinking there's a problem.
The key word is thinking.
Yeah, I agree. And a dear friend, an amazing storyteller, a man, Leon Cossa, he says, the game is to inhabit the center and the periphery and then hold the tension in between. Which
is exactly what Jung calls holding the tension of the opposites.
Yeah.
And, that to the situations we're talking about, to AI, to technology, we have lost the wisdom of the elders who were able to teach us not to rush into trying to come to snap conclusions and solutions too quickly. When we have technology at our fingertips that tells us the answers to everything, we don't know how to hold the tension of the opposites. We don't have enough wisdom to determine information from knowledge from wisdom. And, the reason your guys are able to write this book, and the reason I've been able to do what I've done, is because I've spent enough time making mistakes to get to filter the knowledge down to wisdom, so that when I have people come to me as patients or students, I can actually save them from the trauma and the headaches and the heartaches of knowing what happens when you push things too far. Like I can look into the eyes of a professional athlete and say, you know, I've already fucked up what you've just fucked up. And I can tell you what happens to you next if you keep fucking up. So you can either listen to this old man who can probably still outlift you and outrun you, and has done many times, or you can just keep fucking up till you're in so much pain that you listen to me. I'll let you decide which it'll be.
What a choice.
I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. I sure am. By now, most everyone has heard of the healing power and wide variety of nutritional benefits we gain when taking Shilajit minerals. As good as it is, it doesn't taste good at all. Imagine eating rotting rocks that have passed the due date. You're probably about right. But there is an exceptional way I get my daily doses of Shilajit that tastes fantastic. That's Organifi's Shilajit gummies. The texture and consistency of the gummies is excellent, and they have just enough natural sweetness to make me feel like I'm getting a lovely, healthy treat that both my body and mind can enjoy. The only problem with Organifi's Shilajit gummies is that you have to hide them when friends are around, and the kids too, or you'll go through 2 bags in no time. Shilajit is a unique mineral paste from the Himalayan mountains. It contains an abundance of trace minerals, antioxidants, organic acids, and nutrient-transporting compounds. It has been known throughout history to boost vitality and strength. Just pop a couple of gummies in and chew or suck them slowly for a steady release of the delicious, earthly, but slightly sweet natural flavor. Your taste buds will enjoy the delicious treat while your body soaks up massive amounts of feel-good nutrition. Rich with fulvic acid, humic acid, vitamins, enzymes, bioflavonoids, antioxidants, metabolites, and over 40 trace minerals, Shilajit gummies can help support energy production, support performance and recovery, support healthy muscles, promote collagen synthesis, promote healthy hormone levels, increase cellular energy, decrease fatigue, promote health. I absolutely love Organifi's Shilajit gummies, and I love knowing that there's something sweet that I can eat that doesn't come with all the challenges most sweet stuff does. If you'd enjoy something tasty that enhances nutrient variety, delivers the minerals your body needs, and helps you look and feel great, don't wait. Get your Shilajit gummies now. Hint, don't just buy 1 bag because they'll be gone before you know it. Get your 20% Spirit Gym discount on your Shilajit gummies. Go to Organifi.com/CHEK20. That's Organifi, ORGANIFI.com/CHEK20 to get your 20% discount on these amazing nutritious gummies. Well, like if we stop the podcast now, it's already juicy. So thank you guys. I'm really grateful for, you know, it's easy for me to tell when somebody's committed and open and isn't just swapping, you know, ideas out of books and other experts like a cut and paste machine. And it's clear to me that you guys have lived what you're doing. You know, the first area of investigation that you guys wanted to get into with me was the 3 pillars: biophysics, biomechanics, and psychospirituality together as one main practice. So I'll let any of you that has something to share take the lead, and forgive me if I throw my 2 cents in there, but I run the podcast as a dialogue because nothing's more painful for me than having people make statements on the podcast that I think could be potentially misleading to people or incorrect. So if I interject, it's not because I'm being disrespectful. It's because I feel an obligation as an educator to round things out.
Oh, Paul, bring it, bro. Like, this is what we sit down, the 3 of us, and do. It's pull each other apart in this exploration. Like, one of the yogic paths for truth is healthy debate.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So bring all the sense. Let's make nonsense.
Then just go ask GTP and you'll get some nonsense.
I'm actually using it in the background. That's where I'm getting all these questions. No, I'm just kidding.
It's smarter than I thought then.
Aramon.
I recently wrote an article. I can't remember what I titled it. Can AI be your guru? I think you all would find it very fascinating. If you just go to paulchek.com, click on the blog tab, and then scroll through you'll see the title will make it obvious, but I tried to address the issue of AI as your guru, because that's becoming an issue all over the world. And it's crazy what's going on. I'm watching this going, oh my God, there's Saruman as your guru. It's going to be a problem. But anyhow,
the woman who brought us all together, an incredible integrative practitioner and Dr. Christabel Yeo, she has a spiritual teacher, Dr. Samuel Sagan, man. I don't know if you've come across him, but his books, The Atlantean Secrets, detail exactly what you've just shared. They're an awesome read. So yeah, just for anyone listening, a really great resource to understand in a fable way the Ahriman and the rise of technology and real freedom. Yeah, those books, The Atlantean Secrets, man, are epic.
Steiner goes heavy into all of that, all through all the epochs from the very beginning of humanity. Steiner's got loads on that. If you haven't studied Steiner, he's the fucking one of the deepest wells that ever walked the planet.
Oh, totally.
Him and
Absolutely.
Carl Jung, they're him, Jung, Yogananda. I don't know if guys have ever studied Hazrat Inyat Khan at all, the Sufi master. He's got I think he's got I've got his 12-volume book set. But when you see the stuff that this guy had mastery of and the depth of this guy, it's freaking mind-blowing, And this guy was early 1900s, and he's telling us what would be going on, with technology and things like that. And you're just like, this is fucking wild. But there you go. Doesn't that just lend itself to the fact that these people were very much into the simple and harmony with nature? They didn't have advanced technology. These guys were like tapping into God consciousness and living from their heart and from their center, and made great art and great music. And Steiner, if you look at the Waldorf school system and biodynamic farming and his spiritual teachings, and he developed eurythmy, which is a movement system that helps people heal diseases and speech disorders. I mean, on and on it goes. It's just like those guys, for me, remind me to not lose touch with what is ultimately essential, with stillness, with being in nature with your feet on the ground and breathing fresh air, and not having your head so cluttered that you can't challenge your own beliefs.
Yeah. I love this, Paul. This is so up my alley, and the kind of working exploration and the meditative contemplation, to use your language, for me is that if there's only this moment, and there's only ever going to be this moment, then all information resides in this moment, both forward and back, as we consider forward and back.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel those men they were inhabiting the moment so totally, from the center all the way out to the non-existent periphery, that they could foresee what was coming. And for me, in the book, one of the practices I say for really remembering self, one of the step-by-step road would be meditation, and then the fast track is psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think them together are the two direct paths to. I also think dark rooms are a really good intermediary, but that's the direct path to what we put as the top of the tree in Biotra for remembering self, true nature, reconnection. And if you can do that in nature, now we're talking. And that's where Vision Quest is such a powerful practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this, man.
Yeah, well, I think it's all great. I'm grateful you guys are sharing what you're sharing. Would you like to start your exploration here with the biophysics, the biomechanics, or the psychospirituality? We've already hit the psychospirituality, but I'm open to whatever you guys want to get into and wherever you want to go. It's your book.
Can I say that I think the core principle of Biotra is the gentle weaving together of those three pillars. I think there's no doubt that the three pillars themselves have merit in people's lives, but there seems to be an attraction for people to find just one of them and go very deep in that silo without distributing their efforts more broadly around that triangle, which probably ends up reflecting more of a sphere. And so I think the original concepts for each of us individually were already well formed. They're, of course, undergoing constant renovations and changes as they need to do. But the real attraction for us was pulling them together and weaving them subtly within one another so that someone can come for the psychospiritual, but indirectly and at the exact same moment receives the biophysical and the biomechanical, and vice versa for all of those different combinations.
Yeah, what you bring up in me, Nick, is that I'm sure you guys are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You may be familiar with Clara Graves' values tree. But one of the things that I think is important for people listening and watching to understand is that if we don't meet as a general theme the baseline requirements of health, the way our nervous system and our bodies are built is it grounds our consciousness back into the body. It has to. Because if you keep ignoring the fact that you're severely constipated, you can end up with a disease. If you ignore the fact that you've got a rotten tooth, it can poison your whole body. And I can go on and on and on, right? But, I think the first step in spiritual development is to celebrate the miracle of having a human body, and really Yogananda says there are 60 billion souls at any given moment waiting for a human body. And if you realized how fortunate you are to have one, you would be dancing and singing in the streets. And I think we've gotten to a place in the evolution of humanity where we have been so distracted from the utter mystery, majesty, and beauty of having, a 6 foot tall man has 100 trillion cells. Nassim Haramein says each cell is made of 100 trillion atoms. Ask yourself what it takes to take 100 trillion cells, each made of 100 trillion atoms, to dance in harmony to give us this experience. And if that doesn't open you to a mystery so profound that you don't want to just look in the mirror and go, oh my God, and take care of that gift, then you've gotten severely distracted by things that are really not that important. So what I'm saying is, to be crystal clear, from a spiritual perspective, I think the most important church is the one you brush your teeth in and look at yourself in the mirror and then breathe in every day. And that real spirituality has to begin with an intimate relationship with your body, and then, of course, food, water, breathing. This is where my 4 doctors, Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Quiet, come in. And I think that when you do that, then the mystery, the magic, and the wonder extends itself first from I, then to we, the magic of relationship and love and intimacy. And that naturally extends itself to sharing your wisdom and life experience with everybody you can to support the world. I think where a lot of people today get very upside down is they get heavy and deep into this or that religious ideology or spiritual this, or even heavy into plant medicines. But countless is the number of people doing plant medicine ceremonies that still are eating garbage, biohacking, and screwing their body up. I just think that we need to remember that the butterfly is innate in the caterpillar. But if the caterpillar is too sick and too broken to weave its cocoon, then it doesn't become the butterfly. And we got to start with some real basic principles.
One of the ways we've put forward Biotra is in a planetary kind of framework where there's 9 planets, and the first 3 are those fundamental stepping stones to create the environment that supports consciousness not being stuck in matter and spirit coming through. And I think that's one of the gifts of the book, and the way we offer it is do what you can. Don't be overwhelmed by everything you have to do, but what is accessible and what is the lowest hanging fruit that you can augment in your environment, in your movement, and in your stance or worldview, so that you can start to open to the majesty of life. I completely agree. It's lost on most of us. It's lost on me many mornings. And so really opening to that. And I think I love Nathan's first 3 planets in the way of how to really just access or utilize biophysics in a way that is supportive. It's really vast and it's quite simple. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Nathan.
Yeah, why don't you, Nathan, also just explain the word biophysics, because a lot of listeners probably really don't understand what that means.
Yeah, so biophysics is obviously how life actually moves energy and information. So our living system is this incredible neg entropy system, meaning it creates order from chaos, and it defies all of basically the universal realities of everything turns more into chaos. And it tries to hold that space under a net negative charge. So we have this incredible organizational principle built into us inherently. Some call that consciousness, God, soul, spirit. And this seems to be the actual blueprint for our human living system to stay at the tip of the sphere, or to use your word, Paul, the tip of the sword of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So the biophysics is how your environment interacts with your four surfaces, your eyes, your skin, your gut, and your lungs, and how that governs and regulates all of the biochemical reactions underneath. So biology and biochemistry are really not even concepts without understanding biophysics, because it's the overarching principle that allows you to understand how your cell membranes on your eyes, skin, gut, and lungs, your mitochondria within every single cell except red blood cells, and therefore your DNA and all the other incredible photoreceptive pigments and substances like water, which 99 out of every 100 molecules is water in your living system. So we're bags of water walking around, bags of intelligent, battery, capacitive water, and we're informing all of those connected parts. And so this biophysics really is so foundational, and it's the thing in the last 30 years that has been, in my opinion, so dramatically corrupted so rapidly that it's required a lot of intelligent people to come together to bring awareness to what's happening and how it's sabotaging our biomechanics, how it's sabotaging our connection with spirit, and to actually find an environment and strategies. So environmental medicine and lifestyle medicine is all based around biophysics and mitochondrial health, and what I like to call foundational health. And that's the 80-20. So that's the 80% that you do, and you're 80% healthy and you can get on with life. And the other 20% is fine tuning. So the first three planets of biophysics involve the mitigation of artificial, visible, and non-visible unbalanced frequencies of light. And then it requires, once that goes through and your living system is now no longer disrupted by the artificial, visible, and non-visible, then you go back to a neutral magnetic, natural magnetic environment where you can connect back with the earth and with the frequencies around you. And all that does is bring you back to center, brings you back to that counterbalance where you can hit that middle point where you can truly jettison in any direction.
You know, we live in a world where stress is constant and distractions are endless. If you're like many of my clients juggling family, career, training, and spiritual practice, you've probably felt the toll it takes on your clarity and vitality. You may even be someone that can't get through the day without drinking coffee, even when it's not making you feel better anymore. That's why I'm excited to share something that's become part of my daily ritual, Nandaka by Peak. Nandaka means the sword of wisdom. It isn't your typical energy booster or coffee substitute. Nandaka is a sacred blend of organically grown adaptogenic and nootropic botanicals designed not to mask your fatigue, but to nourish your nervous system, feed your brain, and support deep, sustainable energy from the inside out. That's what true vitality is all about. Unlike most mushroom products that are stuffed with mycelium grown on grain, Nandaka is made from 100% fruiting bodies. That's where the medicine lives. You get the full spectrum of benefits of lion mane for mental clarity and nerve regeneration, reishi and chaga for modulating stress and inflammation, and ceremonial cacao rich in anandamide, the bliss molecule, to uplift your mood and calm your system. Even the cacao butter serves a higher purpose, acting as a delivery mechanism to carry these nutrients deep into your brain. When I take Nandaka before podcasting, teaching, writing, or conducting a therapy session, I notice something profound. The energy is steady, the focus is clean, and my creativity flows without resistance. It supports the body, the mind, and the soul all at once. And here's the truth. If your brain and nervous system are overstimulated and undernourished, you'll always be inviting burnout. That's why I don't treat the symptoms. I go to the source. And Nandaka aligns with that philosophy. I'm truly impressed with Nandaka, and that's why I'm excited to share this powerful, effective support and nourishment to help you stay vital throughout each day, to bring you many of the core nutrients most everybody's brain, nervous system, and body needs today. Currently, there are over 18,000 five-star reviews on Peak's amazing products, and Nandaka is trusted by some of the top minds in wellness for a reason, including me. These products actually work. Tune in, reconnect, nourish your core. Try Nandaka and feel the shift. Nandaka is a powerful ally, and right now you can get 20% off for life, plus a free starter kit with your first order and a rechargeable frother and helpful glass beaker for mixing your Nandaka exclusively at peaklife.com/Paul CHEK. Once again, that's PIQUELIFE.com/PAULCHEK. peaklife.com/Paul CHEK for 20% off for life plus a free starter kit with your first order. It also brings you back into resonance with the magnetic field of the earth, which, you can call it Schumann resonance if you want. There's multiple Schumann resonances, but there's a lot of great research on meditators showing that when they go into meditation, that they phase lock into the Schumann resonance. The brain actually links into the Schumann resonance. And I think that that opens up the real network of what Desjardins called the noosphere, the sphere of mind. And, I know from my own life that I've really been very careful to keep myself healthy and do a lot of spiritual practices, Tai Chi, Qigong, and various other things, because I find that if I bring my biological oscillators, my brain, my heart, my respiratory, my breathing, and my gut into resonance with each other, then the feeling that I have is that then my instinctual system is active and I can hear it. So all of our inborn instincts that are gifts from nature, survival instincts, and even the instinct for love and creativity, Jung says love and creativity are actual instincts. So then we have the ability to trust our gut. But without that, we can't trust our gut. And I'll give you a simple example of that. That's very clear evidence of that. In my holistic lifestyle coaching program, I teach people how to do muscle testing to determine whether or not a given food is ideal for them or not. And what I do is I take all sorts of different things, from organic raisins to ground up organic coffee to commercial shit, maybe some, macaroni and cheese from Kraft. And I'll put processed white sugar, and I put them in little brown envelopes with no labels on them. And I just have and they've got a letter on it, and I know what's in there, but they don't. And I have them all muscle test it. And consistently, everyone tests weak for all the packages that have shit in them, and they don't even know what's in them because their body's just reading the energy field of what's in it, coming right off of it. Now, interestingly enough, people that have an addiction to sugar will test stronger when they hold the package with processed sugar in it, but nobody else will. And so the reason I bring that up is because once the body, for example, has an addiction and it becomes dependent upon something through a negative mechanism, whether it be drugs or sugar or pornography or whatever, now the body's actually tricked into thinking that it needs it. And so it disrupts your instinctual mechanism. And what should lead you to knowing when to stop eating something actually takes you deeper into it. So the point is, the body has the wisdom to guide us if we're calm enough, centered enough, and wise enough to listen. But if we put enough of a distortion into the system, such as a sugar addiction, then we cannot even rely on our body as a feedback mechanism anymore. And then it takes a lot more skilled approach to get someone out of that conundrum.
Nick, I don't know if you wanted to go, because something that really resonates here with me is something you taught me maybe 6 years ago was the body is always perfect and it's always performing a particular strategy to optimize the inputs and outputs it's receiving and trying to attain. So I don't know if you wanted, if that was relevant or if you wanted to go somewhere else.
I think the sentiment was that the body is always responding proportionately to the available information that it has within and without. And so instead of leveling the charge that the body is in fact making a mistake, try to understand and read its response to the aforementioned information and change the information either externally or internally to allow it to find its way back to what Paul's talking about, which we use the word coherence. He's been using the word harmony. And when the coherence has been reestablished, that innate wisdom that's contained within us then has a much better chance at navigating the world that we find ourselves living in. And so that would be the holistic antidote to the situation that Paul described, where the body has actually become addicted to something that we know academically has problems when the person continues to consume them. And instead of trying to, as is in the traditional method, try to take that away and create a whole sort of network of feelings around that particular substance, we're looking at creating coherence and balance in a way without identifying that necessarily as a problem that the person has ill discipline or has made bad choices and those sorts of things, which can create that hierarchical model between the caregiver and the person that's suffering. And that really speaks to the essence of the three pillars merging together, because it's often very difficult to ascertain exactly and precisely where that leak is in someone's system. So instead of a practitioner attempting to do that, we come at that in a very broad and fair manner, and even more so the person that's enthralled in that addictive process or in that environment that may have caused that internally or externally. When they're then in an attractive field of positivity and increased coherence, we can then trust that they will then be able to navigate that themselves.
What I would say to that, Nick, is I agree with that. And having worked with so many people with these kinds of problems and knowing how the body works very well, I think most of the people that have this kind of an issue, like we're talking, we'll just use sugar addiction as an issue. Oftentimes it's environmentally induced. You know, how many kids today grow up being fed that kind of stuff all the time? I mean, shit, the statistics right now are just through the roof. In nature, there's no such thing as energy without nutrition. You cannot find energy without nutrition in anything any living organism eats. But when we started processing food, we produced energy in the disguise of food that did not have nutrition in it. So what I see commonly in cases like this is that when people have what we would refer to as a sugar addiction and they test positive, meaning the body wants the sugar, the body has actually been conditioned like Pavlovian reflex. The only place I can get the energy and the nutrition that I need is through what this person eats. So it's actually craving the nutrition, but it doesn't have a mechanism or a menu to say, it's not that I want, it's that, because the system's too cross-wired, or the menu of perception is too narrow in a lot of people. They don't understand the difference between, for example, eating a date, which is loaded with sugar, but it's loaded with nutrition, and eating a teaspoon or 6 in their coffee or whatever of sugar. So the point I'm making is that the body's trying to express the need. It wants the energy and the information, but what it's really craving in metaphor is the fresh, organic orange, apple, date, peach, pear, carrot. But the mechanism of that information reaching the brain is being interpreted as I'm craving sugar. You understand my point?
Yeah, I think if we distill the entire method and even extend that to, I'm being presumptuous, your philosophy, I think the three words that emerge is energy, coherence, and safety. And those three words have a very beautiful interplay between them. And so someone might be yearning for safety and misconstruing that as faux energy. And it goes round and round the merry-go-round until we can establish coherence within and without, safety and perception thereafter, which includes the we that you mentioned, and energy, which from Nathan's standpoint comes from this aquaphotomics wheel that's produced predominantly in-house as a direct derivation of safety and coherence.
Apophotonics, is that what you're saying? What do you mean by that?
Aquaphotonics, but I'll hand over.
Aqua. Okay.
Yeah.
But describe the coupling of words for me there, because I've not heard that term.
Yeah. So aquaphotomics is a field that sort of really emerged, I would say 10 or 15 years ago, from the understanding of Gilbert Ling and Gerald Pollack and Mei Wen Ho and a lot of these, Emilio Del Giudice and a lot of these experts. And then it moved over to sort of Russia and Poland. And there's a lot of studies being done now on different light, electrical and sound frequencies into water and living water, and how that creates different states of water. But not only that, but actual coherent different charge potentials. So they can create bridges between beakers with air underneath if you have the right frequency connecting into the water. So this is, through the microtubule network, through the mitochondrial function, we produce about 10 liters or 2.5 gallons of water in our cells every single day. And this is a classic part of, our living water matrix recycling itself and replenishing the battery capacitive effect of our living tissue and living matrix. So the actual interactions with this deuterium depleted coherent water within our cytosol is what forms that connective foundation between all of the gene expression, mitochondrial energy dynamics, and then the electricity that's captured within that water network, such as, let's use my favorite organelle, the mitochondria, as an example. They have a 30 million volts per meter charge potential across that membrane. And this is the inner membrane of the mitochondria, which has molybdenum loaded through it. And this voltage is trapped in there and insulated via the deuterium depleted water surrounding it. And that charge is released very slowly and topped back up when we're under full spectrum light. And then that charge is released through to other areas of the cell to power, the microtubule, mitochondrial, myelin axis, to allow neurons to fire, to allow electrical conduction to move through the CSF, through the peripheral nervous system and the central. So, it gets very deep and complex, but it's really the area that's compromised in a modern world from the exposure to artificial unbalanced visible. So that's generally in the high energy visible light, the purples and dark blues that are isolated from the spectrum, because they've been shown under NanoLive to when you look under a NanoLive microscope, you see mitochondria that are exposed to this high energy visible light. They stop moving after a short period of time. They stop producing water. They stop providing oxidative radicals to signal, and they basically become lazy. Then they tend to fuse together as a defense mechanism, and then they need to go through mitophagy and recycle. And eventually that metabolism in that cell starts to deteriorate, and you lead towards, a lot of problems. So when we have the infrared component that's added to it, which is available 24/7 in nature, but most notably during the day when the sun's up in green spaces, because that chlorophyll throws the infrared back to you, this actually balances out the charge in the cell and allows the aquaphotomics, the light, electricity, and sound interaction with the water, especially the mitochondria, to create stable charge and balance blood glucose so insulin doesn't get depleted. So if we have the high energy visible, that can release glucose into the blood. And if you're looking at a computer screen sitting still, it's a glucocorticoid. You're not moving your muscles. That glucose builds up, and you can get, over time, you can get diabetes from just being exposed to artificial visible light.
But also overstimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which jacks your cortisol through the roof, and on goes that cascade.
You got it. And the artificial non-visible, which, in the average American home, 25 wireless devices have been added in the last 20 years. mean, these are Wi-Fi routers and, robotic vacuum cleaners and smart fridges and TVs and, take your pick. These also have a glucose raising, cortisol raising, oxidative and unstructuring effect on our water networks. Mm-hmm. And this is where we start to see when athletes that, we all deal with are training in indoor facilities around Bluetooth speakers not void of infrared light, because the LEDs just do not have infrared light anymore. Mm-hmm. Then they're weakening their water dynamics in their tissues. And, we've all seen non-contact, non-full speed injuries happening so rapidly, more than we've ever seen in human history. And now that we're living in a 5G world with all these wireless devices and all this unbalanced light. So that's what I see as the central thesis of the biophysical problem with the modern world, which is what we address in Biotra.
Yeah, beautiful. Have you, by chance, listened to my podcast with Alexis Cowan?
Yes.
Oh, because Alexis is, I love Alexis because she's Jack Cruz with heart and soul.
Yes.
And she's polite.
She's a smart cookie.
She's awesome. I love her. I was just on her podcast. We had a fun time. The other thing that you haven't mentioned, but I think is important for the public to know, is that the effect of antibiotics on the mitochondria. I've had to deal with that. I owned my own physical therapy clinic for 3 years. And then I worked in the sports and orthopedic physical therapy clinic for 4 years. And I worked in a chiropractic clinic for 2 years before that. But when I worked in sports and orthopedic physical therapy, we had 13 surgeons there it's a huge clinic with a surgical center. So we had 13 orthopedic and neurosurgeons, and I had 35 or 36 doctors sending me patients. Almost all the work I was doing was based on insurance, unless people paid me cash, which was by far less common at that time. But the number of people that I saw in a complete energy and health crisis due to chronic antibiotic use was unbelievable. And what I would do, one of the first things I'd do is I'd put them on a low intensity, steady state aerobic exercise program, because I found research way back then that showed that it can increase the mitochondrial population by 300% in a very short period of time. I think it might have been 6 or 8 weeks that they did the study on. But when you consider how few people are doing any exercise, and the reason I liked aerobic exercise for fairly sedentary people is because it gets them to breathe. It gets them oxygenating their body and just using the breathing mechanism. And nowadays with things like stationary bikes and elliptical trainers, people that are fairly orthopedically inept can still do a decent aerobic exercise workout.
Yeah, look, for me, the grounding piece I think is really important, because a lot of people struggle with that, and they don't have an electrical engineering or an electrician sort of standpoint and understanding. There's a whole field called building biology, which is a field emerging and much needed to help people create indoor living spaces which are regenerative instead of degenerative.
I've used it, and I recommend people to building biologists. It's very important. It's a very small but very important field of people that are not easy to find.
Yeah, so if you go to the Building Biology Institute, you got to look up your location. There's sometimes 1 or 2 people in your state, so it's quite difficult. And there's obviously some that are better than others, but it's the premise that basically mitigating these fields, there's 9, 2 visible, 7 invisible, and then cleaning out the mold, the air purifying, the water. There's geopathic stress, radon gas. There's lots of different elements to this, but the visible and non-visible light are the 2 that I've seen the biggest improvement with, because in the built environment, mold has a challenge, but in nature you can walk past mold and there's no issue. So when I come back to the built environment, there's a principle that people like, which is grounding. And the golden rule from everything that I've learned and all the experts I've spoken with, including Paul Haro and Marco Simeone and a bunch of others, are that you cannot ground in the presence of live power. So this is really pivotal for people in their home when they're sitting at their desk, and if they have a grounding mat, or they're sleeping on a grounding sheet, or they're wearing grounding shoes in a city, you're actually causing a dramatic cost and potentially not even getting a benefit, an outweighed benefit with this situation. So there needs to be compensation strategies put in and a deep understanding of electromagnetism. And that's why one of the things that I've been working over the last 2 years with some really bright minds is to build a plug that goes between your grounding sheet and grounding mat and the wall so that you can safely ground indoors in the presence of live power. It should be world first. So that'll be coming out next year and that'll help people. But until then, find a green space, dirt, concrete, all those areas, sand, water, salt water, fresh water, all of it, great places to ground.
Even concrete actually will ground you. You could probably see my floor behind me. That's terracotta clay. That's paramagnetic. So it actually adds a lot of energy. Many of my friends have come over and will come in here and lay on the floor on a hot day between sessions of a workout or stone lifting. And they all, without me saying a word, go, is it my imagination or is this floor giving me a lot of energy? I know it's not your imagination. It's paramagnetic energy you're experiencing.
Can I just add, Paul, that one of the greatest alleviations of my job clinically over the last couple of years has been to no longer need to explain all these things to a patient in a short time frame, because Nathan took the time to make a very short course that's very succinct. It's 9 modules. Mm-hmm. And how he structured it of 20 minutes so anyone can familiarize themselves with these very, very quickly and start to orientate themselves around practices that they might employ. And it's structured in the way that the 1st to the 9th go from the lowest hanging fruit to the highest hanging fruit. But then within each 9, there's a low hanging fruit to high hanging fruit option. So if, in Nathan's own words, if you just do the lowest hanging fruit in all of those 9 sections, you're 85% of the way there. And then you can just go back around that loop. You have the material forever and you can start to traverse down, or you can start to sink deeper into the silos as the first 9 become automated and you're no longer thinking about them. They're just common sense. They're just practices that you do. And then all of a sudden you can explore that deeper and you can get into the 99th percentile, which really then affords you the luxury of constant, stable energy, deep sleep, and a genuine feeling of goodness in your body all the time.
It's the time of year when many of us refocus and recommit to lose weight, improve our fitness, and in general set new health goals for the coming year. The problem is that typically these resolutions don't last beyond the end of the month. And that's not because people lack information. Most people know what to do, but they struggle because they've become disconnected from their body's wisdom and from their own inner voice. And that's why Paul created Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1. Yes, you'll learn the fundamentals of breathing, eating, moving, sleeping, drinking, and thinking. These are the 6 CHEK Foundation principles, which are guided by the 4 doctors, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. But more importantly, HLC1 is not just another course or program. It's a powerful immersion to help you get in harmony with your unique design. It's practical, it's experiential, and it's deeply transformational. So join us this March at the Rainbow House in Southern California for 3 days led by Angie CHEK. If you're a coach, a practitioner, or someone simply ready to take ownership of your life and your health, this is your next step. Spaces are limited as we keep the group small so everyone gets personal attention. Visit paul.chekinstitute.com for more details and to claim your seat. That's paul.chekinstitute.com to sign up for Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1.
Yeah, one of the challenges with grounding today is, the typical approach to grounding, aside from having people buy a grounding mat and a grounding pillowcase, is to get their feet on the ground. But that's turning out to be very dangerous because almost everywhere you go, you got glyphosate and chemicals all over the place. So I have had to tell people for many years, make sure where you go barefoot is a healthy place to be barefoot. And that's very, very important because those most of those chemicals are fat soluble. They'll go right through your skin just like nothing. So people need to be aware that having your feet on the earth is important, but having your feet on earth that's not poisonous is just as important, or you might ground but give yourself a disease because you completely overload your detox systems, and on goes the cascade. And this goes back to our talk of where does nature end and something else begin. And so here we're seeing it, right? Nature does not intentionally kill herself. She doesn't produce inventions to kill herself. It's all an attempt to enhance survivability and thrivability. But we've crossed a line to where a huge percentage of what we create to make our lives easier is actually killing us and the planet. And I think one of the reasons this conversation and almost every conversation on my podcast is so important is because it's making people aware that we're creating an environment that's making it harder and harder for us to get healthy, and harder for us to find water that's not poisonous, food that's not poisonous. With all the geoengineering, who can breathe without a load of aluminum and barium and all this other shit? But that's why things like using a sauna regularly, or exercising enough to get a good sweat and to have good nutrition. And I'm not a supplement guy, but I always look very carefully at what each person's profile is. And for example, if someone's showing me indications of inadequate detoxification, I might put them on milk thistle, or I might put them on a whole food B vitamin complex, or whatever it is that I think they need to give them the support while they're making the transition into a healthier diet and lifestyle. But it's going to take all of us to work together through informing the public to get us to start putting our money into the hands of the corporations and the people that are actually, taking care of the planet. And that's why I think, being aware of all these things is so important, because we're working ourselves into a cul-de-sac with a lot of black mold in it.
Yeah, so I think what we love to do, though, is to bring people back to what they can do immediately. And
yes,
that's create a sleep sanctuary, build a 30-minute Biotra practice into your 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. time, where 85% of the world records are broken in that PM sort of time, and work with your biology. Make sure you eat a big breakfast and some very simple things, see some natural light, and when they do that, then they can start having enough energy to help clean up the world.
One of the things that I've found incredibly helpful is biogeometry. Have you guys worked with biogeometry at all?
Yep.
It's like, yeah, exactly. And I've had Ibrahim Karim on my podcast probably 3 or 4 times, and he's a personal friend of mine. My wife, Angie's an expert at it. She'll be teaching for them sometime in the near future when she finishes her instructor training. I've seen Angie do miracles to people. I mean, literally had people in the terminal care ward about to die. She does biogeometry on them, and the next day they leave because they don't want to be there anymore, and they go off and get healthy again. And so I think there are solutions, but it's also, we got to work together to police things like, 5G and all the wireless crap and all the stuff you guys know about. But, this goes back to my concept. You got to get yourself healthy at the physical level, at the eye, before you can become, before you have enough energy to contribute to the we and the all. And so these key steps actually are steps not only of health, but they're steps of awakening. Because as you get healthy and you realize how you did it, you start looking around at seeing how everyone else is living. You're going, no wonder, it's a miracle I made it this far. That's what inspired me to do what I've done. Is I never forget, when I first learned about gluten intolerance and how common it was. This is a long time ago. I mean, people used to accuse me of trying to mislead people because they believed gluten intolerance was a bunch of bullshit, especially medical doctors. But once I identified my own gluten intolerance, healed it, made the diet modifications, everywhere I went, I just saw, my God, people have gluten intolerance everywhere. People have no idea what they're doing to themselves, right? So I said, I got to start, lecturing on this and teaching on this. And In fact, I did a debate with a guy, I can't remember, his Dave Driscoll, I believe his name was, in Sydney, Australia. He worked for what's that energy drink company?
Red Bull
Powerade?
Gatorade. Yeah, he was a Gatorade representative. I won't tell you the whole story; it's long. But anyhow, he kept challenging our senior instructor, Donald Carr, and was upset with the personal trainer gym chain. I'm forgetting the name of it now. It's the big one in Australia that Donald Carr was the education director for. They got like 2,000 gyms. But he kept going to them and trying to leverage them to get more Gatorade education. And he was telling them that the CHEK system was bullshit and all that. And they started to believe it. So I said, well, just tell them I'll debate them on all this stuff. The point being is this was probably, when was this? Maybe 2005 or 6 or so. But in the debate, one of the things he attacked me on is telling people about gluten intolerance. And he was citing that there's no medical evidence that there is such thing as gluten intolerance, and trying to convince people that I was a quack job because I was warning people about gluten intolerance. And so, we're always, point I'm making is every step you go towards getting healthy and you realize the changes you've made. I used to be inflamed. I'm not inflamed. I used to have brain fog. I don't have it. I used to have pimples all over my skin. Now I don't. I used to have a hard time pooping, and now I don't. So you start looking around and all your friends, they all have all the shit you used to have, but they're doing exactly what you were doing. And you can't help but say, hey, I think you might have gluten intolerance. You might have food allergies. You might have whatever. And so there you see the natural outpouring of consciousness and awareness through the acts of getting ourselves healthy. And I think that's really what we're all doing. Every one of us that has enough energy, life force, and consciousness to realize what we've done to ourselves and who's doing it to themselves, well, we naturally want to go support them because we're ultimately all one at the core, right? There's, the ego creates the illusion of individuality, because without it, then you can't experience love. So it's got a beautiful, in other words, unity needs individuality in order for unity to be appreciated consciously. So I think there's always a gift in there's always light in the darkness. So, the next thing you guys have, which I don't know, Nathan, if you said what you wanted to say, but you have cellular energy and information crisis, how modern life starves our cells of mitochondria, light, water, magnetism, and foundations of health. Did you cover what you wanted to cover on that, or is there anything more you would like to share on that concept?
Yeah, the biggest part of that is really appreciating that the sun is a full spectrum of infrared all the way through to ultraviolet and the 7 colors of the rainbow in the middle. So to realize that this is the only reason any of us are here, it's the only reason the plants are here and the animals and anything else. So to really start honoring, loving, and respecting that, and knowing when you mess with that spectrum, you start taking isolated parts of it, you start completely changing your biochemistry. And the other aspect is to remember that every single light source needs to have broadband infrared within it. This is why incandescent bulbs were, really helping us not have a dramatic chronic disease burden over the last, 80 to 100 years, and why filtering the full spectrum of light with low E glass windows and then removing the incandescent and replacing it with narrowband LEDs is started to create toxic, degenerative environments indoors, and then adding the wireless frequencies. So when you start to see the patterning of what actually puts us together, and then you can start to see that what starts to break us apart. And it's quite a simple solution once you see the forest from the trees. It relates to, pretty much I would say there's about 7 to 8% of all chronic diseases are genetic, and the other 92 to 93, according to Douglas Wallace, who's a mitochondrial world expert, and I agree with him, are epigenetic or mitochondrial based. So you have complete control over that, and you have complete control over your sleep and your chronic disease burden. So to bring people back to that, knowing that they can have that outcome and not have the modern world take that from you, and then to then go to the next level and go through the 9 planets of biophysics on the Biotra website, you will then find strategies so you can continue to live a modern life digitally connected, still using phones and iPads, but just on airplane mode or in Faraday bags, or using cables and fiber optic connections, and simple little things that you can do to shift, put a desk outside, start working outdoors on your computer, simple little things that you can still live a modern life. So you do not have to give up all of these beautiful things that we've developed with industrialization and all the things. And in fact, you can get away with more cheat meals or, cheat days where you don't exercise if you get all the other parts of foundational health correct. Your light environment, your sound environment, your sleep environment. So that's just the message. It's a message of empowerment.
I think too, what I would add to that is, to a lot of listeners, not so much on my podcast, because people that listen to my podcast are pretty hip. They're, my observation is they're much more intelligent than most people out there and more health conscious, so they wouldn't be listening to us throw around $10 words like biophysics for 2 or 3 hours. But I think, I have a saying, you've probably heard it before. People always ask me, what's the best exercise? I say the best exercise in the world is the one you'll do regularly. Point being is, if the best you can do right now is start with getting good water into your body and drinking high quality water, or getting to bed in circadian cycle, or going to farmers markets instead of supermarkets, start anywhere. Start with any one thing, because the benefits of that is it will inspire you to do the next thing. And then you can kind of take it on in a manageable load, so it doesn't feel like you got to turn your whole life upside down, because, a lot of the patients, by the time they get to me and they're really sick, I have to, go through the whole house, so to speak, say, because, Humpty Dumpty's, falling off the wall. And so we don't really have the option of saying, well, let's just start with water and see how you do. We got to make enough of a shift to generate a healing response, or there's not going to be a healing response. But I think most people could take any one of the concepts that we've been talking about, and it would give them tremendous benefits.
And Paul, the last thing I'll say on that is, you and I, you probably don't know it, but we have the same lenses on.
Raw optics?
So Raw Optics actually used to buy their lenses from my company.
Oh.
So it's a melanin infused pigmented lenses. Especially the yellow ones actually have a decent amount of that. And so Biospectral is the company behind there. So I'm glad you're wearing those, and I'm glad you're enjoying them. So that's something else that people can do.
Yeah, Matt's been on my podcast a few times. Actually, he was passing through yesterday and wanted to come visit, but he just called me at like right before he wanted to come visit, and I had too much going on. But I love Matt, and I've got, I think, 3 podcasts with him. And I'll never forget the day I had some blue blockers that Ben Greenfield had recommended to me, that he recommended on his podcast. And Matt said, let me test those for you. And he pulled out his light device, and it turned out they weren't blocking any of the negative blue frequencies at all. And so he said, here, let me show you mine. And it blocked them all. I said, well, that's the end of these, and I'll take those. And I've been wearing them ever since. And my kids wear them as often as we can get them to put them on, especially at night. It's so cute. My kids look like little mad scientists with their, blue blockers and the ones for the evening on. And they actually quite like them. I think they like, because the lenses are colored. It gives them a little Elton John effect or something. You guys, I'm digging the dialogue. I really appreciate the depth you guys have gone into, your honesty, your courage. You have to have a fair bit of courage to bring concepts like this into a clinical environment, because inevitably you're going to run into people that think you're weird, you're strange, or you're just too out of the box. And, I've had many seriously intense, what started off as discussions with doctors, but ended up being arguments that people could hear for a city block. And physical therapists saying, how dare you talk to doctors like that? And I say, you know, the difference between God and a doctor. God doesn't think he's a doctor. But I would never argue with doctors stupidly. It's just that they were telling me things that were so fucking backwards, I couldn't even believe it. And I had to set them straight, and I had proof of it. I'll give you one example. they might send somebody to me with a rotator cuff pathology, and then the patient would go back for their follow-up visit 2 weeks later, and I'd be with them. The doctor would say, "How's your rotator cuff pain?" And they would say, "Look, it's all gone." And then they would say, "Well, what did Paul do?" "Well, he actually never worked on my shoulder. He changed my diet, cleaned my liver out, and did some work on my neck." And the doctor would get right pissed off. Like, "I didn't send you them for that. What are you doing with this nutrition shit? What are you doing working on their neck? I sent them because they have a rotator cuff injury." I said, "Didn't you just ask her how her rotator cuff was?" And so I would get attacked because I wasn't following protocol, because the protocol was useless, because it wasn't treating the problem, it was treating the symptom. Point being is, I know you guys have to have a fair bit of spiritual courage to bring this stuff into a clinical environment, because most people in clinical environments I've found don't grow themselves. So once they get their degree, that's it. They think they know what they're doing. The next thing you know, they're using an ultrasound machine for the next 20 years, and that's it. So with that, Paul CHEK preface, one of the things I wanted to share with you before we get a little bit more into the psycho-spiritual aspects is, and then do a wrap up of practical applications anybody can do, is I noticed that you guys have the hallmarks of Rudolf Steiner's system. And so you're talking about, for example, the fluid body, the electric body, the pressure control body, the morphological limb activation, rhythm activation, and sequencing activation. I wanted to share, Steiner broke the body up into 4 key systems. He called them rhythm man, sense man, metabolism man, and limb man. So the limb man is what you use to move and to feed and to create, to function in nature. Metabolism is obvious. Sense man is the nervous system, and rhythm man is the respiratory system and the hormonal system. And so Steiner packaged the body up that way, and I thought his teachings were beautiful, but it was neat for me, as I was reading your outline and looking at your book, say, "Oh, isn't this interesting? These guys have actually found the same pathway that Steiner taught, but probably didn't realize that they're paralleling Steiner's teachings."
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that there's precedent, and we make no mention of the fact that we've come up with these things out of thin air. We're very well aware of the respective lineages that have contributed to these ideas, and all we maintain is that we put it in modern language, have some modern antidotes to modern problems, and ultimately carrying on the torch for what allows humans to be centered and in their true nature. And what I might just add to that, which you don't know, Paul, is that actually in the most recent retreat that we ran, I refined those pillars of the physical practice down to 4 sections, which you might find interesting. The language that I used, I called the first one the ocean, which talks to these primordial hydrostatic, hydrometric forces, these embryological movements, the fostering of brainstem safety. I called the next one the field, which was the sensory motor apparatus and the spatiotemporal capabilities and knowing where someone is deeply within themselves and their environment. I called the third one the animal, which was the integration, locomotion, movement, cross-body activation, developing the respective qualities and characteristics of the parts of the limb so that the limb could come back as the whole and integrate with the body. And then finally, the 4th section was called the song of movement, which is just looping all the way back to that drum analogy that you shared at the beginning, with the membranes and each tissue acting as its own qualitative percussive element to play this excruciatingly complex and beautiful symphony that allows us to be who we are. So there's, they're a little more abstract, and I think they're more for the people that are already really invested in the Biotra approach, have a really deep understanding of systems like it or our system itself. But the ones that we use at the outward-facing first impression that people might get, they're words that, albeit a little bit outside their normal knowledge realm, are more attachable to things like the ones that you mentioned before.
Yeah, Steiner was largely teaching to anthroposophic medicine practitioners. But he does sometimes use language that's applicable to most anybody. But I have about 185 Steiner books in my library, most of which are translations of shorthand translations of his lectures that he did all over the world to anthroposophic medicine practitioners. But Steiner only wrote a few books. I think he only wrote 4 or 5 books himself. And in those, he does a good job of making it publicly palatable. But when you start getting into all these other books, they get very, very deep. And Steiner has his own language. So it can be you'd have to have a lot of patience because it might take 30 pages before he explains a word. And until then, you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Jung did the same thing. Many of these people, Sri Aurobindo, they come up with their own words because there's often things that we don't have words for in our language to describe. So they're kind of forced into a corner. But yeah, there's a lot of beauty in the simplicity and the complexity as we've been discussing.
I think the real value in the system as it stands at the moment is the way that it's structured from the deepest echelons of the body through to things that are much more familiar and much more likely to have had an existing relationship with certain elements of that. And the real mission right now is to educate people and to give them an embodied, practical, easily accessible experience to tap into the deepest ones, because they're largely out of the conversation. People really don't start to talk about the earliest ones. And as you know from your experience, and as we've later discovered, that's almost always where the problem lies.
Yep. Yeah. But just to go one step deeper than that, my CHEK Totem Pole used to, at the top, have the respiratory system. But I realized through all the work that there's one thing more powerful than the respiratory system, and that's the psyche. Because your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings, and emotions can alter your respiratory system in ways that are not healthy, but we can choose to commit suicide and shut down every system in the body. So the psyche, for me, became the focus of my research for the last 25 years, because I found it didn't matter how good my program was. It was all the mental, emotional issues, belief systems, and traumas that were leading people to have great health programs, diet advice, but them not actually doing the work to stick to the plan. So I think the psyche is actually the source of, the spirit that creates. And my only point in bringing that up, which leads into our discussion of psychospirituality, is that I think we can have the kind of conversation we're having and people not aware of, all the things that we're talking about. But oftentimes you can give the best advice and the best programs in the world, but if you aren't able to address fears, insecurities, beliefs, programming, and trauma, then you have a lot of blocking factors and people don't follow through. So I found the psyche is actually more powerful than the biology, and that I had to ultimately weave an integrated approach to mental, emotional healing into the structural and physiological approaches. And the better I got at behavioral change and deep mental, emotional healing, the better the compliance I got and the faster they got healthier physically and physiologically. So over my career, I came to the point where I realized more depths of study of anatomy, physiology, nervous system, brain reflexes wasn't helping. So I had to switch gears, because if I wanted to really help people, I had to get to where the real core issues were. In other words, I think it's a lot of people's beliefs that lead to the choices that lead to the problems that we may or may not be able to always address. Sometimes getting people on the right exercises can create enough shift to bring the psyche into a better state. But I found that it's not quite that simple, especially if you're working with traumatized people.
It's directly related there, because you make the shift and then they feel good. So it comes back to psycho-spiritual or psycho-emotional state. You know what I
It
mean?
does, but unfortunately, a lot of people have guilt and shame attached to feeling good, depending on what kind of stuff they're carrying in their system. And I've worked, for example, with many athletes that are elite but can't get to the higher echelons, but they have internal blocking factors such as fear of success, fear of responsibility, fear of pressure. And so there's oftentimes ways that they're aborting their own commitment to themselves and to their training. And for example, I found a lot of these people end up being exercise fanatics because they're actually using exercise to dissipate their fears and insecurities, but they don't realize they're overtraining themselves into less optimal performance. And so I have to work with the deeper stuff. So it's just like the Tai Chi symbol. You can't separate yin and yang. It's impossible.
You just described my sporting career.
Well, I've just described a lot of sporting careers, some of them in your own country, because I've been a consultant to a lot of your top sports teams and your Australian Institute of Sport. But I think we'd all agree we have to sort of have an open, receptive approach to being sensitive to what each individual needs, because there's no two individuals that are the same. So if you start using cookie cutter approaches, you just killed yourself if you want to be the best therapist you can be. But Ryan, I'd love to hear what you have to say about psychospirituality and what you feel is important to share and that you feel was important to the Biotra concept.
Well, dovetailing from that conversation, something we say, or I say on the educational immersion that we run in the Solomon Islands, is that being fixated on being healthy is inherently unhealthy.
It is. It's a fixation.
Yeah. And there's a word that popped up before, Paul, ego. And I think ego is it's huge right now, and it gets villainized quite heavily. And
it drives me crazy, all that villainization of the ego.
I mean, the vernacular of psychology has made its way onto social media. So one thing we often have to re-educate on is that the nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, that's not bad. That's normal. Your nervous system responds. Its job is to respond. So to be in a fight or flight response is not bad. The way I scale it would be immature to mature, and that depends on your circumstances growing up and opportunities, initiations, and rite of passage. But I think ego is a fucking great place to look at for people.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I've looked into the etymology of ego because Steiner describes it in his teachings. Have you looked into that at all?
No, I'd love to hear it.
Steiner breaks the word e and go down. Means of the, go means earth in Greek. So the word ego is actually a Greek word that means of the earth.
Does that relate into what you were talking earlier about illumination and I can't remember the word, aramea? Does that?
You mean Lucifer and Ahriman?
Yeah.
No, I think it's actually the meaning of what the ego means. It means each individual is a creation of the earth, where
beautiful.
We come from and out of the earth.
Yeah, epic. I mean, that's so my frame for that, and what I share. It's in the appendix of the book. Is I would say there's an individual where we all are an individual. The ocean contained in a drop, so to speak. And when that individual is operating from fear, we term that the ego. And when the individual is operating from trust in life and connection to nature, I would call that them residing in their essence.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I often give is, often people think the ego is bad. I would say the ego is the alarm clock that I'm operating from fear. And we only ever operate from fear when there's one belief at play. And that belief is that I'm separated. So a belief of separation for me is the original sin or the original mistake. And if that belief is at play, then I'll naturally operate from the ego in the negative sense. So in the inflatory, in the fake, in the illusory sense. And if I remediate, if I repair, or if I just realize that is an illusion, I can't ever not be a part of what I am.
Right.
Then I reside back into my essence. And I've really been trying to paint the picture that the ego is not bad. It's actually the doorway back to who we really are. It's the alarm clock that goes, oh, I've forgotten. And in the yogic sense, they had the kleshas is the tree of ego. And the first step of ego is forgetfulness, abhiganesha, forgetting who I am. And when we forget, we then create a separate identity, which is the I. The I then gets likes and dislikes. And then it gets a group of people around it who have the same likes and dislikes. So its false sense of individuality, its I-ness feels real. And then the last stage of that is we defend that at all costs. And that's what I would say is politics and religion.
Yeah. I'd like to share some different conceptions. One way I relate to the ego is if you take the concept of the I, use a little I, like line with dot on top, that's an ego. Steiner's description of the I is it's actually God consciousness within you. It is the I that is the framework of perception, which gives you a sense of self, a knowing of I am. Without the I, without God's consciousness, nothing would be capable of consciousness. So if you think that we're all expressions of the one source, whatever word you want to use for it, it's ultimately God consciousness that's within us. That's the ultimate awareness of who we are. But the individual expression, which comes through enculturation, which we have to have, or we don't know how to navigate the environment we're in, that's really what be more like, sometimes people call it the false self. But from a psychological perspective, the ego is the nexus of consciousness created by what Jung would call complexes. But as Steiner says the ego begins to develop as soon as the child uses either the word I or no. That's the first indication that it knows that it's separate from. And then the ego doesn't normally finish its development in a healthy tribal society till the age of about 21 to 25. But current research and even very skilled psychiatrists and Steiner initiates said that often today the ego doesn't form until about 36 to 45 years of age, and it may never form due to the environment. Ken Wilber shows that 72% of the world population right now is still in the child archetype, which means they don't have an ego. From the technical perception of the ego is the ability to discern self from other, right from wrong, should from shouldn't, yours from mine. So the ego is what gives us that ability. But the ego is also, from a spiritual perspective, extremely important, because even though we're born in a state of unity and the I is really the background that is perceiving, in other words, the truth is we're connected to everything and we are inherently a part of everything and one with everything, but we're unconscious of that. So the programming that we go through, oftentimes, which is challenging, gives us, so mom says, food, and we understand food, and then mom says, hot, don't touch, and we learn that that's hot. And you pull on the dog's whiskers and it bites, and mommy says, no, doggy bites. So you keep adding those experiences, and eventually what you get is a nexus of what Jung would call complexes, but ideas where we've invested consciousness in that link up and create a sense of self. So once the ego is formed, our sense of self, who am I in society? Where do I live? What's my belief system? Those are really just a nexus. That's what we call the ego in common parlance is the nexus of ideas and beliefs that create a sense of self. But because it's a programmed nexus, it's actually not who you really are. It's just everybody else's ideas about who you should be, what you shouldn't do. And that's why it always leads to a spiritual crisis, where you realize that whoever is inside of me calling the shots isn't a very good guide. And that begins the spiritual quest, when you realize the ego is not a good guide. But from a spiritual perspective, if we didn't have an ego, there would be no vehicle for love to exist. You see, if I thought you were me, like a child thinks the couch is it thinks the floor is it thinks the dog is it's fused with the environment, then we would not be able to have the experience of giving and receiving love and be conscious of it. So it's because I have a sense of self that I can say, I love you, Nick. I love you, Ryan. I love you, Nathan, and express a flow of energy and information through empathic and compassionate connection to self or other, which is what I define love as. And if you do a deep enough psychedelic journey, then you fuse into everything and you can be one with it all, but there is no I, thou anymore. You're just in a samadhi state or a total union state or an egoless state. Then as the drug wears off, your sense of self returns, and then you have I and thou, lover, beloved, subject, object, and then, we're back into the matrix again. So what I'm saying is I think that the ego is absolutely essential, but I think the ego is like a sword with two edges. It serves to create individuality so that God as you can have a unique individual experience, and you can learn and grow and progressively self-realize and come to the realization that the ego that you thought you were is not really who you are, but it gave you an opportunity to have a mind, to fit into a culture, to have a matrix. So I tell people from a spiritual perspective, we first thing we do is build a mind, which we call an ego, but then spiritually our job is to blow it. We got to blow apart our rigid ideas, our fixations, our God expects this out of you, mommy, daddy, because until you actually blow the ego to the point that you can consciously realize that you are one with all that is, you're still trapped in an illusion of separation. So this is a summary of my thoughts on the ego in a very brief explanation.
In essence, I totally agree. And that's for ease of understanding, I termed it differently, whereas essence versus ego. And the journey is from ego into essence. And traditionally in initiatory programs, it was to individuate, and individuate means undivided, means whole.
Yes.
And so that beautiful journey of realizing the ego is not my enemy, but it's actually my alarm clock to go, oh, fuck, I still think I'm my mummy's little boy. I still think I'm this. And all Don made me so aware of this. All of these complexities come down to the conflict between non-duality and duality. And most people position duality and non-duality as opposing forces. And what I would posit is that actually duality arises out of non-duality. So it's informed by non-duality. And connecting that in the head for me is like, oh, so life is actually just trying to wake me up all of the time.
Yes.
It's my job
to become conscious.
It's my job to stop pretending to be asleep.
Yes, exactly. And you couldn't do that without an ego.
I agree.
Jung's probably the great master of individuation. He's got more writings on individuation and the nuances of that than anyone I've ever studied. But, in Jung's concept of individuation, it's got two paralleling aspects. One is to become whole as an individual, to become an adult, a contributor to society, and to carry the responsibility of being in a family and being a parent, and being a contributor. In other words, to go from infant to child to adult to elder wise man or wise woman. So that would be more of a chronological state of individuation and maturation. But the deeper aspect of it is to progressively bring the ego through various awarenesses and spiritual practices into communication with the unconscious, so that more and more of what we think of as unconscious becomes conscious, and the sphere of the ego's reference grows and grows and grows until you walk around living in a state of conscious appreciation and union for the fact that you are one with everything. It's not a religious idea you read out of a book and sounds cool. It's actually an inherent state of being. And in my system of conscious evolution, simply put, this is the evolution of I awareness to we awareness to all awareness, or I-centric to earth-centric to cosmos-centric self-realization. And then non-dual is at the top of that thing. But it's the source of a lot of psychological stress. And a lot of this tracks right back to religious silliness. It's a great way to control people, trillions of dollars are made probably every year off of this misunderstanding. It leads to a lot of disease problems, a lot of relationship problems, a lot of religious confusion, and it leads to a lot of people asking AI questions that they should just get by sitting quietly under a tall tree. But I think, too, that everything that we're talking about, for example, one of the most important things I think a person can do is go into a quiet room with a foam roller, for example, and just feel their body and roll that out and say, oh, look, I got a lot of pain in my thigh, and start asking questions like, what might that mean? And then with the help of someone like me, I said, well, your stomach meridian runs right through your rectus femoris. Let me hear about your diet. In other words, I can show them as they learn to ask questions about their body and pay attention to the fact that maybe they're a hairdresser holding their hands up all day, or a dentist looking in a mouth, and that leads to pain in the levator scapula trap. In other words, we can use the body as a road back into themselves, and then we can use that awareness as a stepping stone and say, okay, this leads to this, leads to this. And so I think that it's a really simple thing to begin the individuation process right where you're at, right in your body.
Mm-hmm. I agree. There's a map that I provided, a Venn diagram, and there's 3 givens in this world. There's experience, and there's a multitude of experiences taking place all of the time. There's experiences from the past. We can forecast to the future. I'm having an internal experience while I'm hearing this podcast experience. There's actions. There's action happening, whether I like it or not. The sun's rising and setting. There's cell action. There's all of this action taking place as a happening. And then there's also interests. There's my individual interests, my peculiarities, my love for my Land Cruiser, my like for flower, like all of my, and those 3 Venn diagrams in the middle, I would say that's our essence, our true nature. And if I explore my experience, if I'm interested in it, that it grows bigger. I start to learn what I like and dislike. And then that naturally informs whether I assume my interests or I pursue my interests. And then finally, with actions, I'll take skillful action or unskillful action. And if I explore what I'm experiencing, if I explore my experience, take skillful action and pursue my interests, those circles start to overlap more and more. And then my center starts to become more prevalent. My soul, my essence, my true me starts to come online, until my whole life feels like this divinely orchestrated movie where I'm the main character, also the spectator, the sport team, and every other player and person. And there's a happening that I'm a part of. And I think that's the essence for me of spirituality, and vice versa.
I love it. I have a very similar diagram I created. It's got 3 overlapping circles. Love to do, would like to do, need to do. And in the middle where they overlap is the word joy. So at any given moment, we've got a choice to do what we would love to do, what we need to do, or what we would like to do. And as long as we're conscious of devoting the time that's essential to meet the need to do, love to do, and would like to do, then we're actually participating in our life adequately enough that we are likely to experience the joy of living. But if we stick to the would love to do at the expense of the need to do, we create problems. If we fixate on the need to do and we forget the love to do and would like to do, then we become like a workaholic or an addict. If we only do what we would like to do, but we don't do what we need to do and what we would love to do, then we still throw ourselves out of balance. There's these 3 factors have to be looked at and engaged. And my point is it's the same sort of structure, but ultimately, everybody's always in the pursuit of happiness and joy. But I think joy is just listening to your heart, expressing your natural creativity, which comes from what you're calling the essence. I call that the soul or the spirit. and being like the need to do. Well, I need to move my body. My body's telling me to get out of this chair. I need to go poop. I can't keep playing a video game and ignoring it and suppressing it, or I'm going to screw myself up. I need to eat real food. We here know what kind of needs we're talking about. I need to be honest in relationships. I need to get enough sleep. If you overdo any of those three circles, then you throw yourself out of that sweet spot called joy. And I think sort of this is a different concept I didn't plan on getting into, but I think part of the pathology we have is everybody has this idea of happiness that is something where, the sky is full of balloons and money's falling out of the sky, and you get your sexual needs met at your whim and whatever their fantasy is. But I think, I've had to work through a lot of really challenging times in my life. I've been flat broke. I've been so injured. I laid in bed and bled in sheets and had to peel them off me for weeks at a time, and broken bones all through my body. But I never really lost my sense of happiness. I not that I was jumping up and down and going, oh, great, I just fucking ruined my head and got a severe skull fracture or whatever. Just like, I was like, okay, a lot of these came from motorcycle crashes, racing motocross. And I was laying in bed thinking, well, I fucked that up, and I learned something from that. But I couldn't wait to get out of bed and go do it again. So there you see my point is that the real joy is not the exclusion of challenges. And I think what you're calling the essence, I think if we listen to the essence and we look at love to do, need to do, would like to do, and we balance that, and we balance what you guys are talking about, then we actually experience enduring happiness, real happiness, not bubblegum happiness.
Completely agree. What I'm really hearing you just speak to that wellness is not circumstantial at its core.
No, I think there are circumstances, but that usually shows us where we're unconscious. The pain teacher always shows up to direct our consciousness to where we need more of it. Mm-hmm. But why don't we close out, you guys? Because I could talk to you guys for 1,000 hours. We are all interested in the process of humanity and unfolding and God and love and life and everything. So, if you were closer, I'd blow you a bag of smoke to celebrate. But, why don't we just wrap up? Maybe each of you can throw in some commentary on what you suggest for anybody without necessarily having to spend a lot of money, or, consider the statistic I gave you about how many people are just sedentary and not participating, drowning in electromagnetic pollution, scared to death because they believe everything they see on the internet, don't know what real food is yet, don't know what real water is yet. What's your inspirational words and maybe your favorite 2 or 3 try this items? I'll let any of you go that wants to go.
I might frame that up. I think that the way that the Biotra approach is structured has a degree of temporality within it. I think that although everything lives at the same time and progresses in a structured manner, I think that Nathan's biophysical approaches are the most pressing and lowest hanging fruit and fastest acting things that people can do. And as that's unfolding, the physical approach starts to then make sense in someone's life, not just because it's paired with the biophysics, but also because it's a relationship that they can start to develop regardless of where they're starting from. And throughout that journey, somewhere along the line, they become so back into themselves that Ryan's work starts to emerge. And Ryan's work is really, from that point on to the rest of their life, that constant inquiry and curiosity about the questions that we've been discussing today. And nothing ever gets left out or not included in that sense. Like I said, it all starts at the same time, but there's a degree of temporality within how it can roll out and continue to serve someone forever. So my words are just to start, don't deny yourself what you deserve, which is to feel good and feel back in yourself and to experience states of joy. You deserve to experience that. Everybody is wonderful, and just to pick up the pen or to buy the book or to buy something that assists you with biophysics, or just to go outside if you don't have $20 to put towards yourself, start with the things that are absolutely free and let everything else unfold around that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Very beautiful. Thank you.
So the most accessible thing that I feel everyone has access to is to watch sunrise. Now, this is
Beautiful.
the most profound shift I've noticed in myself and my chronic disease patients, my athletes, my parents, everyone, my grandparents. It's a thing that's shifted the most. It's kicked off the signal. Low resource, face east at sunrise. And if you can find a space where you can, you don't have too much blocking, that's fine. But if not, it doesn't matter. The light scatters. So just face east and be outdoors at sunrise. I think the next most important is to protect your sleep architecture and your nourishment into a wind down routine. And
Yes.
perhaps that may even be first, because you need to go to bed and actually be sleeping in order to actually wake up for sunrise to feel truly refreshed and nourished. So they really go one in the same. So create a wind down routine for yourself. And that may involve, candles. It may involve blue light blocking glasses. It may involve no tech. It may involve no screens, whatever it is. And then from there, eating during daylight hours. And that's foundational no matter where you are.
Very good. Practical, simple. I did a year of Egyptian sun gazing. My soul had me do that. I probably was 46 or 47, but I did an hour every morning with sunrise, an hour every evening with sunset. And I had absolutely profound spiritual experiences that I still continue to engage the results of those experiences to this very day. In fact, you guys can't see it, but I have a mandala I painted over there that represents the experience I had of the sun, what I saw inside of myself. That is a very simple thing that anybody can do. And what I tell people to do is, if the sun's too bright, just tip your head down until the sunlight hits your eyebrows and it diffracts, and just adjust your eyes to what's comfortable. And then you won't get the blind spots from the sun. But, that first and last hour of sunlight are generally safe to look at. And I think for all the reasons such as circadian rhythm reset, and then there's a X factor light that's often talked about by experts, that's very nourishing to the body, brain, and soul. There's a great example of something anybody could do that can have long-reaching physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual effects.
And Paul, just to elevate that a little bit more for people with a nice nuance, there's a lot of research in the photobiomodulation or photodynamic therapy industry at the moment that shows pulse light frequencies actually have a much more penetrative and almost like drinking water as a gulp instead of a beer bong, instead of sculling it. So when you blink, you actually flicker the natural light, and you're actually able to absorb that light more effectively. So if you're at a 5-minute point at sun gazing and you're starting to feel the glare coming in, you start blinking, and that'll give you another 3 to 4 minutes where you can continue to experience that nourishing direct red and infrared and blue and full 7 colors of the rainbow. Doing that in a green space will add the infrared nourishing around you as well from all the different directions. So 75% of the blue sky is infrared. So remember, it's coming from above you. It's coming from the green chlorophyll around you. So the more of a natural setting you can do that in, walk to a local park, do something like that for yourself, and you'll be doing yourself a huge favor.
Yeah, beautiful. Ryan?
Sorry, echoing what we've all shared. The kookaburras were going crazy because a big goanna just came through.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just echoing what the brothers have shared, and also what all of us have shared here. And my sentiment is, if you have the privilege, opportunity, and resources to find out who you really are, I believe it's your duty, and it's our duty. And I just wholeheartedly encourage everyone to pursue a spiritual path, to lead their life.
Yes, and I would just add to that by sharing my favorite definition of spirituality, and that is a progressive connection to an ever-expanding whole. And so, first your first stage is really connecting to yourself, then expanding to the love and the opportunity and we relationships, then that naturally brings you to the expanding whole of all of us on the earth and what we all share together and can give each other and how we can support the planet and each other. And then from there, like for example, sun gazing, you can meet the spirit of the sun. I've had many of my students come back and think they were crazy, but realize, no, you're not crazy at all. In fact, I can tell you all about that being. I've talked to it and do every day. And then from there, you can have even more beautiful things. A few months ago, for example, I was in my morning meditation practice where I go into a meditation and do heart breathing. And sometimes I get beings from other dimensions showing up to talk to me, but all of a sudden I saw this amazing, beautiful white lotus coming out of the middle of a black hole. And it was like I was seeing a galaxy from off in the distance, but I saw this beautiful white lotus, and there was a blue woman sitting in it, like she was made of blue light. You know how often Shiva is painted blue or depicted as blue? She was blue, like sky blue, but almost like self-luminous. And I said to my soul, what on earth am I looking at? My soul said, you are looking at the Milky Way galaxy, your home. I said, why is there a woman sitting on top of a lotus in the middle of what looks like a black hole in the center of our galaxy? And my soul said, that is the black hole in the center of your galaxy. That lotus is a symbol for perpetual growth. And the woman that you're seeing is the spirit or the oversoul of the Milky Way galaxy. Would you like to meet her? And I said, absolutely. So my soul brought me into her, and she was in deep meditation, and she opened her eyes and looked at me, and she said, hello. And I said, what is your name? And she said, my name is Amor. And so I began to ask her questions, which I won't give you all that because it would take too long. But it was so profound, I actually painted that, and I'll quickly grab it and show you. Well, actually, I can do it real quick. I'll show you what it looked like because I just I have to paint this. I wish I was a better artist, but this is what came out. Can you see it okay?
That's awesome.
I don't know if the light's refracting off it funny or not. But anyhow, there she is. And so underneath the lotus is the black hole. And that is my depiction of the Milky Way galaxy. And she was just sitting there in deep meditation. And, eyes were closed like she was meditating. She just opened her eyes and looked right at me. And she said, hello, Paul, like she already knew me. And I said, what is your name? And she said, my name is Amor, which just blew me away. It's just like, oh my God. So anyhow, I'll just put that aside so we can not have to wait for me to go hang a picture. But you guys, I've really enjoyed this dialogue together. I'm really proud of you guys. To me, you're young guys. I've got a son that's 46. So chances are some of you, if not all of you, could be my own sons. I'm just grateful. For me, it's great to see, guys your age really living from your heart and pioneering your own path and being brave enough to share your truth with people and eating, sleeping, breathing, and shitting your truth. So there's no gap between the story you tell others and the story you tell yourself. I think that's one of the things I learned in my clinical work is that if there's a gap between the story you tell others and the story you tell yourself, that's like a black hole for your energy. It creates a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity. You never really know who you are because you're always wearing too many masks. And I've really enjoyed being with you guys because each of you is very centered in your authentic self. And you're very open to challenges and to exploration. And I'm just grateful to know that you guys are out there sharing your love with everybody. It's really important in the world right now. So thank you, all of you, for doing that.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. That hits.
Beautiful. If you want to give any websites or anything you want to direct people's attention to as we close?
I think, Paul, for us, it's www.biotra, biotra.com.au. That's where you can find
.com.au. Okay.
Yeah, and you can find your way into all of our worlds from there.
It'll be in the show notes as well. So biotra.com.au for Australia. And the book is available on Amazon, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct.
So
and Barnes and Noble.
And Barnes and Noble. Good. So, there's lots to read in here, but you can see the text. It's got lots of big images like this. So it actually looks scarier because of the size of it, but the text is easy to read. It's well laid out. It's very methodical. I think anybody that's genuinely interested in their own wholeness will not find it a hard book to get through, and will be richly rewarded. So there you go, guys. What a great wrap session, and great share, great exploration, and what a synthesis of wisdom and knowledge. And, for the listener, you got maybe 2.5 hours without ads. And it took us all a combined shitload of years to get to where we could share this together. That's
Thank
called
you so much,
rapid
Paul.
acceleration for the listener.
Absolutely. Thanks you, Paul.
You're a fucking beast, man. Thank you for all your years of work and for being so supportive as us as young bucks. Respect, man. Thank you.
Yeah, lots of love. Keep doing it, man. And, there's CHEK professionals all over Australia. They're right up they have the depth of understanding to have good rap sessions with you guys. And they're your kind of people. So, for those of you that need help in the world, there's CHEK professionals all over. You can go to chekinstitute.com, and at the bottom of the homepage there should be a locator system. And if not, you can call the Institute and ask where to find a CHEK trained professional near you so you can get rehab. Do any of you guys still work clinically? Can people come see you privately?
Yeah, I'm sitting currently in PH Clinic in Sydney, Australia. It's got everything you could need in the range of practitioners and passive therapies to support basic biophysical needs and everything to do with the clinical pathological side of mind and body.
Okay, good. And Nathan, are you taking clients?
I do some consultations, especially for extreme cases, stage 3 and 4 cancers, autism, Parkinson's, well-developed ALS, things like that people say are incurable. So absolutely support in those situations. I've seen incredible outcomes. So usually 1 or 2 a month, but I try to limit that based on the spread that I have with other commitments.
Where do people find you for that?
NathanSiles.com is a really good local place to find me.
SILES?
That's it.
Okay. Ryan, are you doing anything like that?
I run with a brother of mine, Jacob O'Neill. We run a thing called the Embodied Man Institute. So we're a not-for-profit reinstating healthy masculine culture in Australia, and we have an online men's academy which brothers can reach out for, and we do get men through rites of passage initiation and living a life that they love, particularly learning to lead in relationship themselves and their career.
Super important in the world right now.
Yeah. And so people can find us on Instagram, the Embodied Man Institute, or theembodiedmaninstitute.com.
Awesome, you guys. Well, thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you who are joining us today and for sharing the love and the wisdom and inspire. I hope you feel inspired to make the best of the changes you can, one step at a time, and inspire others to live and love fully. Thank you to my sponsors for all the love you share and for the great products you offer, and for each of you for anything you buy from the sponsors that supports the biodynamic and organic and free-range farmers that supply the sponsors. So you support the planet, you support the sponsors, and a little bit goes to the podcast. So it's a a circle of winning for all of us. And I'm excited to share something with you in my next podcast. And quite honest with you, I have no idea what it'll be, but I'll do my very best to make it as educational, interesting, and fun as possible. You guys, get a hold of me when you write your next book or you got your next big explosion of we got to tell the world about it, and we'll rap about that too, okay?
Absolutely.
Love it.
Thanks, Paul.
Aho.
Thanks, Paul.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK and today's guests, Dr. Nicholas Dawe, Nathan Siles, and Ryan Barraclough. You can find out more about Biotra and buy the book at biotra.com.au. You can also follow them on Instagram at Biotra_official. Nathan can be found online at biospectralsystems.com or on Instagram at nathan.siles. Ryan can be found at ryanbarraclough.co and Nick on Substack at drnickdawe.substack.com. Spirit Gym listeners can also get 15% off biospectral blue light blocking glasses using the code SPIRITGYM at biospectralsystems.com. For those of you looking to share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join Paul's Spirit Gym community. Members can participate in live Q&A sessions with podcast guests, access the private forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study his comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.